Okay, so I'm going to call this meeting to order. So the first thing is to review and approve the agenda. As I recall, I don't think there's any deviations that we need to make from the current online agenda unless someone else has other information. Okay. All right, so with that, we'll consider the agenda approved. So on to general business and appearances. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to address the council on a topic that is otherwise not on our agenda. And if you would say your name, where you live, and try to keep your comments to about 2 minutes, that is helpful. And that's true for the rest of the evening as well. Yeah, but if you have a comment that is pertinent to one of the topics on our agenda, then we'll take it up at that time. But if it's not, if you have something unrelated, now would be the time to discuss it. Anyone in person have anything they would like to comment on? Okay, and anybody online? And you can use the raise hand icon under reactions, or you can just unmute yourself and let us know that you would like to speak, but I am not seeing anyone. You can also turn your camera on and wave, also an option. All right, so we're gonna move on then, because I'm not seeing anybody. All right, so on to the consent agenda. Is there a motion? Jack?
I move the consent agenda.
I'll second it. Okay, the motion and a second. Any further discussion about the consent agenda? I just want to point out that I'm really excited that we are officially funding the Capital Area Neighborhoods project. That's a part of our consent agenda this time. All right, any further discussion? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
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 And opposed? Okay, wow, we're moving. Okay, so we have a few appointments to make. These are student appointments to the tree board. And I don't see Ethan Borland or Ben Weatherall here in person. Just want to see if they are online. Ethan or Ben, are you also perhaps under a different name? But I don't think so. Okay. So with that, I'll just say I'm thrilled and delighted that both Ethan and Ben have stepped forward to be student reps on this board. Is there a motion? Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Can we point to?
Yes,
That's exciting.
because
Okay.
they're not voting members.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd like to move to appoint Ben Weatherall and Ethan Borland to the tree board.
I second.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed? All right, well, thank you, Ethan and Ben. I am just delighted that you are going to be working with the city on the tree board. That is great. Okay, and so we are on to the Energy Advisory Committee report, and Kate is here. Welcome, Kate.
I'm Kate Stevenson. I'm a member of the Montpelier Energy Advisory Committee. And I had hoped tonight to be able to present to you our fiscal year 2021 energy metrics, but unfortunately, kind of trying to pull all the data together at the last minute, we didn't get everything in from the school district in time to be able to present tonight. So hoping I can get a rain check for a meeting in sometime December or January when we can come back with the full report. But I figured I'd still keep my slot to be able to give you a little bit of an update, what we've been working on this year. So in terms of kind of the work of the Energy Committee, the first half of the year was very much focused on our net zero action plan, which you were presented in August with our team from VEIC, the consultants that we worked with. And that's really, it's a 10-year plan to look at how we can bring all the municipal buildings and operations to net zero, which is in line with the city's goal. So that was a big push. We've identified some really clear next steps out of that plan, and now we need to get on to the good work of actually doing it. Um, the other things, big project that we were working on this fall was the window dressers project. And so that's a collaboration with a nonprofit based in Maine. We did it 2 years ago, actually, in January 2020. But what they do is they work with community members and volunteers to build storm window inserts for low-income residents. So this year we were able to partner with some folks from the Mad River Valley. We went out, measured a whole bunch of windows. We just finished building them on Monday. We built 262 windows for 41 households, and about half of those were able to be provided for free through a grant that we had received. So it was a huge lift, but it was also really fun for folks that came out and got a chance to volunteer. And I think we hope to continue to do that annually going forward. And the other big project that you may remember was back in May, we finalized the home energy labeling ordinance to be able to provide a way for people to provide energy information about their homes at the time of sale. And we're continuing to work to figure out some of the implementation pieces that need to go along with that ordinance before next July when the enforcement goes into effect. So that is ongoing. And I guess so those were kind of the three big things. And I will say, we think as a committee, we have struggled to maintain some momentum during COVID. We have lost a number of members, so we're actively recruiting. If you know of anybody who would be interested, to try and find some more people to join our committee. And we've also been working with folks at the wastewater treatment plant. The feasibility of the phase 2 project. I think you'll be hearing more about that, if not tonight, in meetings soon. So definitely have been able to participate and chime in on some of that. But I just wanted to bring to the council's attention one of the things that we've really struggled with, which is kind of how to maintain momentum with the city staff to actually implement these projects. And as you remember, we briefly had 1 day a week Steve Twombly, who was doing some project management. That was really helpful. We had got into the budget in fall 2019 to have an energy coordinator position, but that wasn't a position, standalone position was never hired. And we really feel like there needs to be dedicated staff attention to this. And we're not going to be able to implement the net zero action plan without some additional, as volunteers on the committee, we just can't do it on our own. So I just want to emphasize to the council, like, you've made these commitments, you've set these goals, we've got a plan in place, but to be able to really make it happen, I think the committee of volunteers can't do it on our own. And the staff, the existing staff are doing lots of great work, and they just, this is not their number one priority. So just to kind of reiterate the things that we've committed to that an energy coordinator could do if we had one. One is to work with the department heads to figure out their individual plans to bring their departments to net zero and kind of the details that go along with the action plan. One is monitoring and measuring the city's energy use. The data that I was going to present to you today is stuff that I've been tracking for about 5 years now. And I want to give a shout out to Todd Preventure, our former finance director, who has come back temporarily and has been helping out with this project. But we just, it takes a lot of time to track all this stuff down. And it's not in any particular person's job description. And even when we're able to collect the data, once a year, sometimes we find things and we're like, that's strange. Like, why isn't the solar system at DPW working? We find things that if it was being checked more than once a year, maybe could be resolved. But we also have the Net Zero Revolving Loan Fund. We really haven't had any activity using the loan fund this year. We don't really have any projects lined up. And again, we kind of need city staff support to really kind of scope those projects and get contractors lined up. So that, it still exists, that we have funds available. We just need help to get projects moving. There's also the district heat utility. So whether there's a move to grow it or improve the efficiency, that is something that an energy coordinator could do. And then we also have this new ordinance for home energy labeling, and there is going to need to be some staff involvement in the enforcement of the ordinance and just checking to make sure that people are doing what we've asked them to do. So right now, those things are happening. It's spread amongst a lot of different people and a lot of different offices and departments, but I think we could really benefit from having some focused attention to it, to be able to really leverage the skills and the expertise of the Energy Committee, but have some additional staff support. So that's what I want to leave you with, and hopefully I will be back in a month or two with all the fun charts and graphs that you've come to expect from me to report back on our energy use. There's some really, I'll give you a sneak preview. There's some really big wins. We shut down the district heat summer loop, and that saved us. We went from spending about 15,000 gallons of oil every summer to less than 1,000 gallons this past year. So that was a huge win. And yeah, so there've been some other improvements. It's because of COVID and because of shutdown of some buildings, we're going to see savings in certain departments that may not continue. They're not maybe true ongoing savings. So this year and last year, it's going to be a little tricky to work on the data, but I'll be back. And but before I sit down, I'd happy to take any questions from the council.
Donna, go ahead.
Even without your graphs, your information is priceless. Thank you. But I do want to know, where did you assemble these windows?
Oh, we did it at the mall. So the Berlin Mall, they have a space called the Hub that they offer for very low cost to community groups. So they can use some of their empty.
Take any pictures?
Oh yeah, I have lots of pictures.
Did you take any pictures that you could share with us maybe next time?
Sure, yeah. Give you some pictures.
Any other questions? Good morning.
Thank you, Kate. Always appreciate, and obviously very enthusiastic about moving forward with all this. Just curious, have you all looked at all at, I know that there's a few towns in the Upper Valley that have done a shared energy coordinator position.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if there's any opportunities there, if that's been explored at all. I mean, I would support.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a lot of work for someone to do anyway, but I was just curious if that is something that anyone's been talking or thinking about. And then I know that the RPCs had also gotten increased capacity, so I don't know if that's been something that's been helpful or a resource at all, or something that we should be taking more advantage of, just those ARPA funding that was put in to basically help communities better access those American Rescue Plan Act funds for energy efficiency projects. So just curious if we've seen any benefits of that yet?
Well, yeah, I'll answer the last question first. So there was a webinar on a week ago, Wednesday, I think, for towns to learn about how they can use the ARPA funds for energy efficiency. I wasn't able to attend. I think Donna Barlow Casey was going to try to attend, but I don't know if she was able to. So yeah, I think it's still coming down to, the RPCs, we haven't had a ton of interaction with them on the committee. They collect a lot of data, and then once a year they'll send an email being here's your data, Montpelier. Here's what we think you used for electricity, which is interesting. And is a peek at kind of the community scale energy use, at least on the electricity front. But yeah, it might be worth reaching out to them again, because if they do have more capacity or more funding. And to go to your original question about the energy coordinators, I mean, I haven't heard any talk about a shared position here in central Vermont, but I do, when we were originally, we wrote like a draft job description back 2 or 3 years ago. We looked at the job descriptions that they have for the other towns in Vermont, and also Hartford, Lebanon, New Hampshire. I think there were 4 or 5 towns that we looked at like how they define their position and use that to inform the one that we drafted. But yeah, it also, it doesn't have to be a full-time thing. It could be, we could get a lot done with 2 days a week or 20 hours a week or something like that. But just having someone who's like focused on that, because I know it has been handed to Donna, but to do that and be the director of public works is a lot to ask of one person. So.
Great. Any other questions or comments?
Just great as always. Thanks, Kate.
Great, thanks.
Great, thank you, Kate. And any other, since we're here, any other comments from the public or either in person or online about this topic? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to move on then to the City Recreation Center development options. And I know a number of folks are probably here for that. So I'm turning it over to Arnie and Cameron, I assume.
Yes, I'm gonna mostly
Okay.
turn this over to Arnie.
Okay.
I'm going to be the dedicated slide clicker. Just FYI, our technology is still broken.
Oh, no.
So we will not be sharing the slide as a presentation, but just as individual slides. I'm very sorry, it's very ugly. But we make do with what we have. So,
It's-
and share the screen, and I'll sort of just turn it over to Arnie. We're very excited to present some new and upcoming options to consider when it comes to the recreation. Oh, that's sweet.
I'm gonna shift seats here. Not directly underneath it.
Hit the light on your way by?
What's that?
Hit the light on your way by?
Oh, yeah. You got it.
Oh. Didn't realize you're only moving that far.
Yeah, just this far. John's gonna do it, but from the video. Yeah.
All right, Arnie, time for you to introduce yourself.
All right, I'm Arnie McMullen. I'm the Recreation Director in Montpelier, and I am very.
Sorry,
What's that?
not hearing you. You gotta project Arnie.
Okay, I'll use my gym voice. I'm Arnie McMullen, the Recreation Director in Montpelier, and we're very excited to share some options that we've been talking about. We'll start by talking a little bit about, some of the community needs or wants that we've seen, and it's right there on the first slide, so I won't read through everything, but one of the things that folks in the city want is low-cost, high-quality facilities that reflect community values and wants. And one of the things that we take pride in as a city department is trying to keep costs affordable for all of our participants that want to participate. We have gathered information from some past surveys, and some of the things people would like to see is what we have listed up there: basketball, more pickleball opportunities, indoor walking. I want to change that to a multi-use track, because so many things we do today, a lot of things people like to do in the rec center is also rollerblade. So we do have some groups that rollerblade in there. So we want to make sure we keep, those thoughts open. We've had some very good years over the last few years where we've raised in our revenues somewhere between $250,000 and $300,000, which is a huge help to keeping our appropriation down to the community, through programming and opportunities that we do. One of the things we want to do too is create more opportunities for growth. Right now in our current facility, we're pretty limited with space, and we'll get into some of the renovation thoughts on that. Growth for programming, and community wants more recreational opportunities, as most of us do. We always want the most bang for our buck, and we're trying to find ways that we can actually grow as a department. So the first option that we were looking at originally prior to COVID was renovation of the current facility. The downside to some of the plans behind, well, let's not go to that yet. But, you know, the renovation plan is to make the whole building usable. So that way there, it would be ADA accessible. We'd be able to use every floor. Part of the thought process too was the heating units would actually be on the roof instead of in a room. So that way there, we could use our full basement as well as a cooling unit. So we would actually have central air in the facility. The one thing that this building currently doesn't have, which the renovation will help take care of, would be bathrooms and locker rooms for both men and women, and also a gender-neutral bathrooms as well. So, and you can see in the downstairs space that there's room for 4 exercise rooms, or, you know, a weight room facility with, you know, limited weight projects, limited weights, an exercise room for possibly spin cycles or different things like that, and then some open space for different programs like yoga and other things. The yoga could be a little challenging down in the basement after further thought with basketball on the first floor. So that we would probably rethink and put them upstairs. The first floor level, what we would do in here is redo the gym floor. So you'd actually have a new wooden floor in that space. We would have an office space as well as classrooms. And we'd have a neutral gender bathroom on this floor as well, or a family bathroom. So that way there, anybody with kids and everything could use that to make that easier for them. The upper floor, well, there's also a proposal for solar panels on the roof, and oh, I skipped over one. We'll go back to the second floor. So the second floor we're looking at has some offices up there. It also has a conference room, and depending on what we actually need for offices, we can make an adjustment on those and also have it as another conference space or rental space for quieter programs. But part of the idea too is that, you know, if we get our after-school childcare program really growing, is to hopefully have a full-time director that would actually oversee the childcare program. Because if we grow that to where I'd like to see it happen, we'll be extremely busy. So that said, that is the overall renovation ideas on that facility. Benefits is that it's a city-owned facility. It is in the heart of downtown. Making use of all floors, which is something we haven't really had. We generate a pretty good amount of revenue just renting out the gym from year to year. But if we get it so we can actually use the whole facility, we could actually rent spaces downstairs and upstairs as well. So that would really expand on some revenue opportunities. The limit to this space is there's no room for expansion. I'll just go through some of the really big ones that we're concerned about. The cost is estimated at around $5.2 million just to renovate. And a real big challenge is that there's no additional available parking. And parking is a huge issue. As much as we'd like people to exercise and do all those really cool things, some of my highest intense exercise groups actually want to park right in front of the building before they run in and play basketball for an hour. So those are some of the honest challenges we're facing, that a lot of people do drive, and we do have some parking issues around the area due to such limits. And as you know, the senior center already has challenges with parking. So when we're really busy at the same time, then of course people will park over there as well. And another downside, just as a thought, is it would really limit some of our special events. Like one of the events that we're having challenges this last year we weren't able to do because we couldn't get a space, was a ski and skate sale. And that gym, the last time we used our gym for the ski and skate sale was like 27 years ago. And now, since we moved it to the high school, we basically doubled the space and the amount of equipment, so we could really never go back to a smaller space, as that has grown as well. However, going into the new facility thoughts, COVID has gave us a lot of time to think, because we were put on hold with everything, which I totally understood. And it gave us a lot of time to rethink some things, because originally when we were looking at facility ideas the first time, we were including a pool with it as well. So the cost seemed very prohibitive to folks' appetite, because I think we were talking like around a $14 or more million facility. So what we're looking at doing is creating a new facility, and we are working with a company called Bread Loaf, who's supposed to, they're working with us. They're going to do some drawings on what we could possibly do within this space to maximize the use. And what I'd like to see as a thought process is that we'd have at least 2 to 3 basketball courts in there, high school sized basketball courts that would have multi-use lines on there, so we could do many other programming things as well. An indoor multi-use track. We would also have rooms for classes and exercise rooms, as well as meeting rooms, and probably try to create rooms that could be linked together to create a conference space. Because one of the things we really don't have in the city as well is a large conference room that could host multiple groups from around the city. We would also want to see, what the other thing we thought of with this too is we have a huge need for basically year-round access to bathrooms, that we could put a door on the outer part of the building so they'd be accessed from the outside and heated, so that way we didn't have to worry about them freezing. Currently, behind the stadium, we have some bathrooms that are basically open from April until usually the end of October, when the water doesn't freeze, because we can leave the doors open. But this time of year, we don't have that access. So this would create that opportunity for anybody in the park to have an opportunity, if they're renting the pavilion and the pool's closed, or for some reason there's a baseball game and it's very busy over there, they would have bathrooms right next to the tennis court area. So, which I think would be a huge plus, and be available on weekends for those groups that are renting the pavilion. This would also create more opportunities for our summer camps. As far as our summer day camp, that would be actually our officially licensed site. Currently, right now, it's our pool house. But this would allow us to not only have that program hosted there, but we could also do some of our soccer camps if we had to move inside, or any other program we have down there that needed to be inside due to the weather. It would give us that space. It would also allow, one of the things we were looking at on this was having a actual garage door that you'd enter from the outside for programs such as our ski and skate sale, where we have trucks pull in to unload. We could actually just go straight in the building and have the trucks park at the door and literally unload trucks really simply. And then, your eyes are getting bad when a little bit of lights are off. Let's see. It also puts a lot of our facilities in one location. So now we have, if we had a rec facility down at that space, we have the pool right there, we have the baseball fields. So a lot of our administrative tasks could be handled right on site, instead of having to scoot across town if something happens down there, which, knock on wood, we've had good luck and hasn't been a big issue. Some of the limits, it removes the recreation field. It does take a field out of use, but I think there's ways to work around that. The parking's still a little bit limited, but it's far better than the site that we're on right now. And the cost for this building, I'm going to adjust that just a little bit, but I think Bread Loaf said somewhere between, I think they said 5 and 7, didn't they? Does that sound about fair? So between $5 and $7 million, but it's for, again, a brand new building, and one that should meet the longevity for the community, rather than, I'm afraid with the Berry Street facility that with so a lot of effort. We're going to outgrow that space pretty quickly. Not to mention that we don't have the parking to begin with, so that makes it challenging. But I want to see for the capital city of Montpelier that, we have a facility that we're going to be able to grow with into the future. And I think I look at Montpelier as the hub on a wheel, for lack of a better term, and the surrounding communities come in on the spokes. Because every community that we set up for our youth basketball program, our youth soccer program, drives through Montpelier to go to another community. So it's kind of a neat setup for the community to have something that creates that kind of convenience. And it's going to draw a lot more people to the community. And option 3, let's jump into that. This is an option that became a new idea for us because we learned about this a little bit later. But there's a group that in Montpelier that's called the Hub, and they're looking at doing some work with the Elks Club and trying to develop a facility for themselves up there. But there also is room up there for a facility for the city to build up there. And we have a really cool picture here of the facilities. The blackened in space there is where we would project, that's for the rec, right?
Yes.
So that's where the rec center could possibly be developed.
Here's a nicer picture.
Yes, that's the one I'm looking for. So this gives you a good idea of where we can, of some of the things that could be done with this facility. So there's the projected rec facility place. Then you have the hub in the back. And then the other place is the current Elks Club that they're looking at doing some renovations, doing a restaurant and a few other things. They do have a current childcare facility there for kids under the school age group. So they do have that. So that could be an opportunity for us to work with them to develop that infant childcare that the city would like to see happen. Depending on what happens with the golf course and stuff, there's thoughts of, this is some stuff that the hub has had drawn up on different field possibilities on what could be out there, as well as I think they put an outdoor tennis court someplace, didn't you?
Yes, I'm going to zoom in because this is very exciting. We also do have 2 members of the Hub leadership team here to answer any specific questions you might have about this. But this is a really lovely diagram of the potentials that they see out of the site, because it is over
30 acres.
Of potential land use.
Which will not only create a space for us for indoor space, but also a ton of outdoor space opportunities. And I think there is some bike paths that are already going to it or through it. So it'll create quite a recreational opportunity right within the city.
Right, so to level set, if people don't know where this location is, I'm gonna zoom back out. So this is the roundabout when you're headed towards Berry. So this is where the bike path goes, or the Sibonaway multi-use path goes right by here. And this is where the train tracks cross the bridge here. I hope that orients folks where we're talking about. So this is currently the Elks Lodge and the golf course here. Here's a slightly zoomed in space also, so you can see that. The white building would be the space that the hub is sort of putting on reserve for potential exploration from the city. Didn't mean to steal your thunder, Arnie.
No, you're doing good. Doing good. It's all about a team effort. So the new option that kind of came out, and like I said, Cameron and I kind of jumped on board late because we had heard through the grapevine somewhere that this group was working on this, and we're like, we should have a meeting. So the hub plans on moving forward regardless of the city involvement. They have plans on, again, doing what they're trying to set up with their tennis / pickleball facility. But they thought it would be kind of a great opportunity, and we can't agree more that this would allow us to centralize many services and, between recreation classes, soccer clinics, and other opportunities right into one area. And we can also, I didn't write that down. But we can also use this as a space where we could really grow. There is a lot of land up there, so if for some reason, 30 years after I'm gone and something else comes up, you can say, hey, we can actually build on here and create additional opportunities. I look at things, when we're talking about buildings and projects and stuff, I always look at things in kind of 50 to 100-year plans, because we want stuff that we build to be here long after we're gone. The rec center, I think, has really lived its course. It was a great facility when the city got it in 1969, I believe it was. And I believe they bought it for $25,000 from the United States military, which is a great deal for the military because they don't have to renovate it. But right now, we're at a place where something has to be done because it's just not an accessible building. It's been great for me because I have to run the stairs every day. But for folks that do have access issues, it is a real challenge. The other thing with that space too is that if we even could have youth basketball games in there, there's no place really for parents to watch. So it's very limited. But option 3 is a very exciting option. I really like option 2 as well, but I think option 3 does give us an opportunity to really work with another group in the community that we could create a really outstanding facility. And offer the folks that live in the capital city, some great opportunities. The one thing that I think is really important in Vermont, and I can say my kids aren't crazy about winter, is to have an indoor space where people can walk. Because a lot of your seniors cannot be out on slippery sidewalks and places that, dangerous footing. And just in general, to have a place where people can walk and meet and hang out, it's an opportunity to create a real community center, which I kind of feel like we should have here. It's just, Montpelier is a wonderful place, and that's the one thing we're missing. So I don't know if there's.
I would highlight a couple different things about,
Yep.
I will highlight a couple different things, I think. Yes. I want to highlight some of the other benefits of looking into this option. The land right now is zoned for recreation, and I think that there's a pretty good, I think it would be wise for us to continue to look at what that means for the future of the city if we were to consider purchasing that land. Even if we aren't able to build something there, what does that mean for the city? I think that some of the other benefits really would be that private-public partnership, because I think that the programs that the hub are offering or saying that they want to offer are really great and expansive, and some things that the city just can't do. And we are able to do things that they wouldn't be able to do as a private entity. So it's a really great way to explore sort of a symbiotic relationship there that we don't really have currently. We didn't really touch on the fact that we have no idea how much this would cost at all. We can assume, I think, that the building cost would be about the same as the one we were quoted for at our rec center, because we still want all the things that we'd want to put down at the rec field. So we could probably estimate $5 to $7 million for that building as well. But that doesn't include all of the field opportunities. It doesn't include what we would need to do to support the hub and their work. So there are some risks inherent in a private-public partnership when it comes to investments. I also want to highlight the fact that it's not in a walkable location. It's very close to our bike path, but the bike path does not get to it. And if you walk that bike path in any regularity, it ends right before the roundabout, and then you're left on your own to cross a busy bridge. So that would be something we would need to investigate. So just wanted to make sure those were mentioned.
And that could also create some opportunities with us with the schools to see if kids wanted to come up there after school, to have them bring a bus up and drop kids off. So that could be an opportunity of another partnership.
So I guess yeah, sorry. So I do want to make sure that we are calling attention to the fact that all of the options that we just threw out to y'all really will require additional public engagement. We aren't dictating any of the plans. We've just been brainstorming on the needs that we understand the community has communicated to us, that we've heard from y'all that are very important, priorities for you. So we still need to go out and get more engagement. If we hear from you tonight, or if you say you want more time to think about it, what options you're interested in us continuing to work towards, we'll certainly turn that around and talk to the public more about that. We also don't have formal site plans and construction contracts. We've been working with Bread Loaf at the Hub, has been working with Black River Design. And so there's a couple different options there. We don't have any formal site plans other than the renovation option. And all of these will require bond funding of some variety. We don't have the budget to absorb a $5 to $7 million project. So those are all just considerations to take in mind, keep in mind while we move forward. And so our real ask of y'all is to just look at the options that we put out and really give us direction on what you would like to see staff put their energy and capacity towards. We do recommend options that have a new building attached to it. We really strongly feel that our building has outgrown its capacity, and we are interested in a new construction. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you. So I'd like to at least just start with questions from the council, and then I know that there are probably some folks from the public who would like to either also ask questions or weigh in on this. So we'll start with just questions from the council for now, and then we'll go to the public. Yeah, go ahead, Connor.
Yeah,
And then
sure.
Donna.
Great presentation. Never felt like totally good about putting the kibosh on the old indoor swimming pool idea with the jump and splash folks. So I'm wondering if we had option 3, maybe now's not the right time, but would that open the door to the future, maybe reopening that conversation and maybe looking at an indoor swimming pool up there as well?
Yes.
All right.
Okay. Donna.
I didn't see a place where you were describing the hub services. Are they talking about specific programs, or did I just miss that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm gonna pull up the map again on this screen so people can see what we're looking at.
Actually, while you're doing that, this might also be a good opportunity. I know Ethan Atkin is here. If you would like to say anything, want to give you the opportunity to jump in. If not, that's okay. Oh, but you should either come up to this mic right here, or you can come have a seat at the table.
Hi, I'm Ethan Atkin. I'm the chair of the board of the Hub. We've been working on this for about a year and a half. And when we got far enough along in our plans that we were fairly confident this was something we could move forward with, we felt it would behoove us to inform the city about it. And I talked to the mayor, and we talked to Arnie and Cameron about it. Basically, what we said was, we're not asking for anything from the city, but we want to inform you that this is a project we're working on, and you should be aware of it, because we think it's going to be a huge asset to the community of Montpelier. We talked to Dan Groberg at Montpelier Alive. He was immediately recognized that this could be an economic development project that can attract businesses and residents, and possibly even make somebody think of building more housing in town. Wouldn't that be a shock? So that's sort of the quick background of how we got here. And both Arnie and Cameron sort of immediately recognized that this is really a generational opportunity. I would be delighted to answer any questions that anyone has, either here or individually later. I did have an opportunity to speak to a couple of council members. And but in direct answer to your question, I think Cameron has brought up sort of the picture of what we're planning to do is retrofit the old Elks Lodge and put in a restaurant, perhaps a brew pub with a bar, and we look at that as more of a social center. And so we're calling this a recreational and social center because we think that as much of what we're planning to do has to do with the community social activities as it does with the recreational activities. So we would have game rooms there. We would have social activities every weekend and in the evenings and in the summer. We do have in our plans at some point to consider putting in an outdoor pool. We're thinking about trying to design it in a way that if at some point it could be converted to an indoor pool, it would be designed that it would have the capacity to do that. These are all sort of future plans. Our immediate plans are to, we're talking about putting in some of these virtual golf machines or whatever they're called, which are extremely popular. We understand from the property owner that they do not intend to continue with the 9-hole golf course there. So that opens up all of the flat land up there, which is about 40 acres. The rest of it is pretty steep and could be great for walking or biking, bike paths or hiking or whatever. We also, so our plan is to have, social activities like, chess night or knitting night or, felting night, or which would involve both instruction and activities, children's storytelling, book readings, you name it. I mean, any ex-tempo can come up there and do their whatever that is, storytelling. Outside, so next to that, we're planning to build what we're calling a sports barn, and that would enable us to have indoor tennis courts, indoor pickleball courts, indoor practice area for soccer, for ultimate frisbee, or any other activity that people might want to do indoors. We're thinking of putting a climbing wall inside. And then outside, we would also, we intend this to be a year-round facility. So we would have outdoor tennis courts, outdoor pickle courts, platform tennis, disc golf, mountain bike pump track, cross-country skiing, which is already set up there. There's apparently the best sliding hill in all of Montpelier. We might put a rope pull on that because it's long enough to accommodate that. There's a lot, it's also right on the river, by the way. The land goes on the river, so you can put a canoe launch or a kayak launch down there. I think there's already a plan to do one a little further up the river, or is it up or down the river? I'm not sure. The bike path that does end just at the property, they're now planning to have it circle around and come back around the property. So this would be, for 8 months out of the year, 7 months out of the year, would be very, very accessible by bicycle or by multi-use, rollerblading or walking. And then we're just open to any other ideas that members have. We intend this to be a membership-based organization, so people will pay a general membership fee to join the hub. If they want to have access to what we're calling the specialty recreational activities, they would pay an additional monthly fee. We want it to be very accessible, that, $2 a day basically would be the general membership. We are also planning to have a after-school program. This won't happen immediately, but where the schools that are interested can bus the kids there. We would have a educational tutor who would work with them on their homework for the first hour, give them a little bit of training on whichever recreational activity they were interested in, and then leave them free to play until their parents get out of work and come and pick them up. So that's a real quick overview, and I'd be happy to answer other questions.
So the Elks Club is going to go totally away? I mean, who owns the land?
So right now, the property is owned by City Properties, which is a partnership with Steve Ribellini and Alan Lendway. They have been extremely cooperative with us. They have indicated that they're open to the possibility of selling the property. And they are, the Elks Club, when they bought the property 5 years ago from the Elks Club, leased it back to them for 5 years. That lease expired in February of this year. And after that, they shut down the lodge, and City Properties did try to run the 9-hole golf course this past summer, but they have no plans to do so in the future.
So would the hub be buying parts of the land that you're talking about using and then opting for the city to buy some, and it's gonna be a patchwork, or?
So a lot of this is still up for discussion.
Yeah.
You've heard Ethan just say a lot of things that also included some services that the city already provides. And so those are opportunities that we'd like to investigate partnering with, right? And so we'd provide a service, they'd provide a service. Ours would be, free or reduced for the community. Their prices now. The hub still is a private membership only. So to talk about the land purchase, none of that has been decided.
To
Moving
be,
part.
to be determined.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Jay?
Yeah, so as we think about a potential partnership with the city, I'm curious if there's a business plan and or some sort of financing outlook to develop the hub, and that so that we can understand that we're comfortable with the longevity of the prospect of the initiative, which I'm super excited about, but I'd love to learn more in the details, especially around the financing.
Also, it's a work in progress, if you will. We have a business plan, we have a financial plan. We are in the process of negotiating to get a loan to build the sports barn. And we're raising money right now to come up with our 20 or 25% that we need in order to get the loan. We're about a third of the way there at this point. So we feel quite confident that we'll be able to get the financing together, but until we have it, we don't know for sure.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions from the council? Then I want to go to the public. Yeah, go ahead, Jack.
Obviously, you've been working on it for a year and a half. It's still early, but do you have a timeline of what you anticipate?
Well, when we first approached Cameron and Arnie, we thought that we might be able to get this to open around this time next year. I think that's extremely optimistic at this point, but we have not dropped that as our possible opening date yet. But I would not be surprised if it did take longer than that.
Thanks.
Fair enough.
And so I do want to highlight that mention in the presentation that their plans are sort of going along regardless of ours. That space, if this is an option that you're interested in pursuing, it's a very flexible space and is different than the building that they're looking at. So the timelines don't have to be congruent.
Fair enough. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Overall, I'm very loud, sorry. I think this is really exciting and seems worth pursuing and better understanding the options and how the partnership would work and those details. Are you anticipating that we would continue to explore the pool option as well, just knowing that there's, unknowns and financing and permits and everything that need to get lined up for the hub project? So is the plan, if council indicates this, to look at the two offsite or two non-current rec center options, so that we have choices? And what would that entail? Is just the architectural design getting, what would be the next phase of that?
Yes, I think that that's really important, that we keep both of those options open. I think working with an architect would be very similar for both buildings of what we're looking for. There's more space at this option for sure, so that does change things, but the next step would be finalizing that design and getting community feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Just in answer to our
Can you
schedule,
introduce yourself?
I'm John Ray Hill with Black River Design Architects and a tennis player. And just a little history as to where we arrive at this pretty exciting moment in time. We, as people know, our tennis facility got shrunk up at First and Fitness when it was sold, and we're down to one court, which doesn't meet our needs. Hence the interest in playing tennis in the winter. And we looked around and we couldn't find any buildings that were of adequate size, didn't have posts in the middle. And we couldn't even find any flat land that had parking. And then when we looked up at the Elks Club, which was changing hands, we looked at all this parking. There's 200 spots there. When the Elks were busy, they would have 300 people there for a big occasion. So the parking was there. It's a flat site. And we had another athletic activity, golf, that we could cooperate with. So Ribellini and we got together and we were going to do locker rooms and share those. And the sharing was a great aspect of this because everything was half price in terms of the renovations. And we were very excited about that. We had our building designed on the left-hand parking lot. And then all of a sudden, Capital Soccer was very interested in outdoor fields, and we asked Ribellini about the possibility of reducing the size of his golf facility, and he said, it's awful flat out there, which was to us a positive response. And then 2 weeks later, he announced that he's not continuing the golf as it is. So just as we thought we were all set to go ahead, all these opportunities are exploding, and it's all good, but it's not helping our timeline. So we have redesigned the building to be on the east side of the existing instead of the left, as you can see. So when you come in, we're not blocking the access to this amazing site. And if people aren't golfers and haven't been up there, it is just an amazing open space. And to think that there's that much land in Montpelier, you only see a few houses. It's just astounding. So do take a trip up there. So we've moved our building away from the access to this whole flat area, and it has the same relationship. And then the idea of leaving a space for the city's needs, they're all sort of around a central hub. And we talked about some of the possibility of sharing staff and having a central place where you register, and can we do it with punch cards? And there's 7 million details to work out, but the possibilities have exploded in terms of our original needs. And so we're delighted to partner with the city because there's lots of things that we don't know anything about that there's room for. We're amazed that the bike path didn't go to anywhere, and now it goes to a big recreation center. There were plans apparently to have the bike path come along the back of the golf course. That'll fit in very nicely. So it's really all falling together conceptually, and it's not helping our timeline, but the potential really, as Ethan says, it seems like it's a once in a lifetime opportunity that's sort of coalescing.
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead, Connor. And then I want to go to the public. Yeah, go ahead.
You think a 9 or 18 hole disc golf course? Fastest growing sport in America?
I should say that the thought on golf,
Disc golf.
well, I shifted topics. I'll answer your golf. The thought on golf is that we offer a different golf experience. They've proven that the 9-hole doesn't work for them, and there are too many other courses around that are better. So what we're talking about now is a much shorter putting green, pitching green, indoor, so that you could go at lunchtime and play golf rather than committing your whole Saturday. disc golf's another area where the potential is enormous here, because from what I understand, disc golf can play through the woods and on the open. So if you're a disc golfer, we could use your help in designing that course.
Sign me up.
So
I think
once
this
again,
drawing is 18 holes, right?
the
number
18
18.
holes is the disc golf course, but
Right there.
so
Disc
there's,
golf, yeah.
once
Disc
again, it
golf's
just
right on
shows
there.
the potential.
And will be out there with a kid on a rack.
Our plan is to make this a net zero facility, so it's going to be very well insulated, and we have a huge roof that's ideally suited for photovoltaics, and Alex Bravakis is helping us with the solar installation. It's got some funding ideas, and we'll be talking to Kate as well, since she mentioned she's may be able to help us.
Great. All right, so I want to start with folks who may be here in person. Anyone who's with us in person wish to either comment or ask a question or anything like that? Okay, not seeing anybody. Anyone online have a comment or a question? Yes, Vicky, go ahead. Oh, and we've got to get you unmuted here.
She should be able to.
You should be able to
Sorry.
unmute. There you go.
Sorry. I'm concerned at the $2 a day thing. That means $60 a month. That's prohibitive for those of us that are on fixed incomes.
Hi, Vicki. I just want to point out that that is the private side of this public-private partnership. So what we're basically proposing as one of the options is to co-locate a city building, which would have the same low-cost community recreation programming next to this private service, which would have more things that you could do for a fee. So the hub itself is a private business that wants to open a recreation type center that is private and co-locate that building next to a public building that's run by the recreation center. So that comment would be sort of for that private business that wants to open. So we as the city wouldn't have, if we entered into this very seriously, wouldn't have any ability to influence their pricing structure. Does that make sense?
It makes sense as long as it doesn't become a haves and have-not situation.
That makes sense. Thank you. Yeah, the rec department and
Because
Arnie could
that's
talk on it.
because that is a very definite thing that's going on now in Montpelier, is the haves and the have-nots. And it's not pleasant.
Yeah, thank you. And your point is well taken. I want to speak to that further after the public comments time. Anyone else with us virtually wish to make a comment? You can either use the raise hand icon under reactions, or you can turn your camera on and wave, or just simply unmute yourself. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone. So actually, I want to jump back to, well, actually, I have a couple comments. I guess I'll start off here. I'm very interested in the potential for a public-private partnership with the hub. I think that has a lot of really exciting potential. And we've been having this conversation over some months now, but one of the things that I was kind of surprised, I guess, about with this was that the city might have its own building. I guess I had envisioned the city partnering with an existing building that, maybe we were helping to subsidize some of the costs, because, thinking about Vicky's point of wanting to make sure that what we are offering as a city is accessible financially to everyone. And I realized that that may mean that all of the hub's services may not be included in that package, but then I want to be really careful and intentional about what is included and make sure that those are things that we've identified as needs, at the beginning of your presentation that we had listed some activities. So that's going to take some conversation. And I mean, if it also means that we are needing to build our own building up there as well, then so be it. But I'm interested in all the possibilities there, even if it doesn't mean we have our own building. But I'm saying that coming from a place of ignorance and knowing that there's a lot more conversation to be had. Yeah, go
So
ahead.
if I could just follow up on that, Madam Mayor, that clearly is an issue. I just point out that both the rec department and the senior center for years did rent space from First and Fitness, so to use their pool, to use their tennis courts, those kind of things. So we envision a situation where just because the facilities are there and on the private side of the thing, the city could rent tennis courts for lessons or that are then part of, our program that then the public can have accessible. They're still getting their hourly rates or whatever. So it's sort of going both ways. That's how the ice arena works, for example. And so it's not, it doesn't necessarily mean just because this is the private side doesn't mean the public doesn't get to use it. It just means we have to work those details out.
Yeah, I have other thoughts on the other two options, but I'm going to save those for now. Other thoughts from council? Oh, okay. Oh, it looks like we have some comments from folks online. Colin O'Neill, go ahead. And I think
Here we go.
there we go.
Can you
Good.
hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, I'm Colin O'Neill. I grew up in the area. I think this is an amazing opportunity. I also manage the Wrightsville Recreation District, which is it's a special district where we combine the budgets of 4 towns to spread that financial burden. And, so I see a few potentials here to really build the greater Central Vermont community, not just focusing on Montpelier, but bringing in, more of at least the entire U32 school district towns. So we're inviting all of those residents to use this facility. The location of it is phenomenal for it to service all of those towns. And then by doing it as a district, you're able to assess a per capita fee to all of those towns to help with operating costs. And if I recall correctly, I think that concept was in Arnie's plan 4 years ago for the Elm Street facility, I believe, to spread the burden and the benefits to a greater area and really strengthen our entire community and not just focus on Montpelier.
A good point. And John Odom would probably want me to ask you where you live.
Well, right now I'm recovering from surgery, living in Montpelier.
Okay,
but
but you're in Montpelier. Great. That's all I
Yeah,
need to know.
but
Thank you.
I grew up in Montpelier, East Montpelier, Middlesex, Plainfield, and I'm the outdoor recreation director at Norwich University, and I run Wrightsville.
Thank you so much. And Vicky, I'm going to wait to, but thank you. Well, I'll come back to you in a bit here. Comments from council? Thoughts? Go ahead, Donna.
I have some questions about Elm Street. I got really excited about that. And I don't want to leave it in the dust. I would propose we spend some time there. And it's good that you're thinking about the building being the same in either place. I may have missed it. Did you mention how many floors?
Right now, that's still up in the air, because if we can possibly spread the building and not need an elevator, that could, save some cost in the overall building. But we haven't ruled that out to do a second floor, at least around the gym area. We probably wouldn't have a second floor over the gym, I wouldn't imagine, the big indoor space.
Okay, and I guess along with that, if indeed, as you're sitting around the table with all these wonderful ideas, and the focus goes to the previous Elks Lodge property and the hub, go back to Elm Street and think about those bathrooms. I got very excited when you talked about year-round heated bathrooms. that maybe there's a way to do something there, whether it's the current pool house or some other smaller structure with solar panels, heat pumps, something that we can do and not lose what we have in that rec field and still build it up. Thank you.
Okay.
Comments from council? Go ahead, Jack.
Very interesting ideas that we really hadn't thought of when we had the presentation for the renovation of the rec building. I thought it was a very attractive project. I thought it looked really good. And I totally get where you're coming from, that one of these other options is likely to be a better option for the city, and I definitely think it's worth exploring. I do think the fact that both of these other sites would expect people to drive there is a negative. You know, I understand a lot of people play basketball at lunchtime over here on Barry Street's probably less likely in either of the other locations. So that's something to consider. On the other hand, knowing what my background is, I see, well, the recreation center, if that is no longer used for recreation, have you done any thinking of whether it's feasible to keep the building standing and convert it to housing, or is the thinking that it's bad enough that it really can't be maintained?
There's a few options that we're looking at. I will say that as for a city facility, the abatement and the ADA accessibility costs are a majority of the costs for renovation. So if we did keep it and didn't renovate it, we would need to have that kind of conversation of what you'd want to see in there. I'm not, obviously those conversations are new and need to be on the table. It is a very old, inaccessible building, though. So it's one of the reasons I think we also talked about a little bit in the negatives of still looking at that option, is that the abatement costs, the more we looked into it, the higher that estimate kept rising, right? I think that 5 million was really low, honestly, when it comes to what the actual cost would be. But I think that it's wide open of what we could use that for.
And construction costs have not gone down in the
No,
last
they
2
have
years.
not.
I've observed that.
So true. Other, Connor and then Lauren?
Yeah, sure. So I go back to strategic planning there, and I mean, Jack was adamant in that, like, what kind of city do we want to be in the future? Like, is 8,000 a right population? Is it 10, 11,000? And as I was thinking about that, it does feel a bit short-sighted to look at the current location, just like you guys are saying there. There's very limited room to expand there. And is it just the right now answer, or is it the right answer? I don't think it is. So, you know, one thing I can put to bed in my own mind is I'm going to flip-flop from my position a couple of years ago. I'm really glad we had this extra time to think about this and get new ideas on the table, because I thought that was acceptable, but it wasn't exciting, right? So having these new options, you know, and I sat down with Nat from the Hub today there, and he's a great guy, got me kind of jazzed about the new option. I have concerns like everybody else, you know, the public-private partnership gets a bit dicey. I think the devil's in the details on that. You know, we don't want people paying for services that they're not paying for now. I mean, I think that has to be like a list of principles we don't have to adopt if we went into something like this. We don't know what the budget is, right? And the transportation, I think, is an issue. Although I wonder if that could be, you know, something we could bring my ride into the mix maybe a little bit, try to beef up the ridership on that by this. So, like, long story short, I'm excited enough to keep looking at it. And like, I do wonder if one option on the table in the near future, it sounds like we're probably pushing a bond vote off to like a year from March. Would it be possible, like this March, to have sort of an advisory question on the ballot if there was a direction we felt we should go? Because I think that would force the public input and give a timeline. and force the hub and ourselves to get more community involvement. And sure enough, if they shut it down there, well, you don't want to put a bond on a year from now. So it gives us a clear direction that we're going. So just a thought there.
It's always a possibility. Also a reminder that there's a November general election next year that could also be a bond vote.
I should have remembered that.
What is he inferring?
You'll be too busy running for senator, I know.
Lauren?
Yeah, thanks. I agree with what folks have been saying. I think it's worth exploring both of the new ones, and think it kind of changes what the conversation we had a few years ago with new opportunities. Just thinking about the ability to expand and grow, I'm thinking like in our strategic planning, there was an idea of a BIPOC community center, things like that we don't have space for and we wouldn't in the current building. So being able to think about, what are some of those center and community gathering things that we've, put forward and would love to see movement on. So would love to explore that kind of opportunity. And I just echo Connor's, and I'm sure all of us will be very conscious and, just what kind of agreement could we lock in, even with the, very, well-intentioned, wonderful people working on it now, but, it gets bought by a hedge fund down the road. And then, what have we locked in for the city? So just wanting to make sure that the values of accessible, affordable, and that, we're able to continuing offering everything we do now and growing and expanding that. So how we would set up that agreement would be really important.
Okay, Vicky, yeah, we're going to go back to Vicky and then to Ethan. Okay, go ahead.
There. Okay, something just came up on my screen. Anyway, I wanted to thank Jack for his comment, because that was basically what I was going to say, is the current recreation center, maybe it could be repurposed into affordable housing or a homeless shelter or a drop-in shelter or something combined on that, because we desperately need something, and that is perfectly situated in town, so that you can actually walk there if you're in town. And also, I just wanted to put my vote in for, if they're going to be any place, anywhere, where the Elks Lodge was, because it's closer to my house. Less driving. I don't like driving on Elm Street. Too much traffic. Anyway, I would really like to see, even if we had to actually take that building down, if we replaced it with some really affordable housing, not just affordable in terms of, lip sync, and a homeless shelter. We really need one of those. I do work with a lot of the homeless, and I know a lot of them. And, on these cold, rainy nights, when you're tucked away in your bed and you're thinking of somebody who's not tucked away in their bed, it's tough. So that's just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicky. Right, go ahead, Ethan.
I just wanted to address the comment about hedge fund. The hub is although it's being called a private, it's not a for-profit organization. It's a 501(c)(7) something. It's not a 501(c)(3). I think it's a 501(c)(7), or it's a non
501(c)(3).
No, it's a 501(c)(7), which is a nonprofit organization that has a purpose of being a social or recreational center. And so it'll be membership driven. It will not be, a hedge fund could not come in and buy it.
Great. So for now, Arnie and Cameron, do you have the direction from council that you need?
I think so. Yep, we will continue to explore the 2 new building options and come back with regular updates on what we're doing.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank you. Good work.
Okay, I think we are ready to move on to the PFAS discussion, but I also wonder, team, if you would like to take a break right now? Yeah, so we're gonna take, it's 7:51. We're gonna take a break. We'll be back at 8:01 for the PFAS discussion. Okay, thank you. are otherwise all here, so we should get started. Okay, it is 8:02. So we are going to come back from our break. Okay, and we are ready to take up our discussion about PFAS. And for this, we had been discussing or wanting to make some comments about an upcoming permit from ANR about leachate. And so we had drafted up a letter. Well, actually, I should say really, Lauren and Jay worked to draft up a letter about that. So just so folks know the order of how this conversation will go, I'm going to let Lauren and Jay, I'm going to let you just speak to what's in that letter or just make any kind of comments you would like to about that. And then Bill, if you have things, I know we have other staff here as well. If you have comments about that, I want to invite you to speak to that as well. And then I know we have some folks from Casella here as well. So I'd also like to invite them to come up and speak to this as well. And from there, we will go to the public and then we'll go back to council discussion. So that's sort of how I'm thinking about the flow of this conversation. But yeah, so we'll start with Lauren and Jay, if that's okay.
Sure, I can take a stab and Jay round it out. So, trying to really reflect the conversation and input that council had, the kind of updates that we got from the Agency of Natural Resources. We wrote the letter that, people can see on the agenda for today, really looking at an approach of, wanting to make sure that what we're doing as a city is not just stopping taking leachate and it goes to another community, but instead continuing to work to try to keep on track the pre-treatment of the leachate so that we're getting more upstream at the problem. So the specific recommendations and actions that we drafted in the letter that interested in you all's feedback on were making clear to the Agency of Natural Resources that our city is committed to developing a plan to eliminate the intake of PFAS contaminated leachate and associated releases into our waters. The piece that Jay and I kind of wrestled with some and look forward to your input was adding in a deadline of how long we would keep accepting the leachate. So we put in as of July 1st, 2023, the Montpelier Water Resource Recovery Facility will no longer accept leachate that contains any detectable PFAS chemicals. We thought this timeline reflected what we heard from ANR of about a couple more months, and then about a year to actually get the pretreatment up and running. So we thought in a year and a half there could be pretreated leachate, and that the technology for treating it can actually remove the PFAS. So if we can kind of put that marker out there that's what we want to see happening. We put in here that we wanted quarterly updates from ANR to ensure to get, mostly so that we can just make sure that the project is remaining on track, that, who knows what could come up, and maybe we'll hear from Casella any issues they foresee, or, how likely the timeline that we were provided is, but just really give us a chance to kind of stay on top of this and revisit if issues are arising or if new opportunities, because this is such an evolving issue and, maybe things could move more quickly and who knows. So we wanted to build in that kind of check-in as we go. We wanted to, in the second bullet in the letter, again, just be doing our part to encourage that this pilot project to pre-treat leachate is moving forward, that the best available technology is being used, ensuring that ANR maintains a strong oversight role of the process, and is really the ones in the driver's seat around determining the technology, testing and monitoring protocols, and implementation timeline. We also requested a more robust monitoring that instead of being quarterly, we suggested that we would prefer monthly testing. Also looking into, be interested in what all are they testing for? We heard some comments about the suite of chemicals. So PFAS is of course of great concern, but there's a lot of chemicals in leachate. So what exactly are we testing for? And also ensuring that it's multiple sites and not just kind of one spot that the testing's happening. And finally, we put in that Montpelier would not accept out-of-state leachate, which we understand happens pretty rarely now. But that was part of the permit. And that wraps it up. Jay, what would you?
Thanks, Lauren. I mean, I think you covered all of the big picture thinking. The only thing that I would add here is that we felt, like Lauren said, we wrestled with this a bit, was that we felt like the timeline that we developed was an appropriate, not compromise, but it just felt like it not only allowed A&R to take the lead, once the permit is granted, but to make sure that that we did have something of a line in the sand that we're saying, like, this is, we're serious about this, and we're concerned, and we've heard from our constituents about the impact this has on our rivers and the Winooski watershed, and that we're willing to be partners in providing enough time to make sure that we can work through the pilot project, but at the same time, we're not going to be passive participants in accepting it. So we felt like this was a reasonable timeline to work to move forward. And I think also part of what we did was build in an opportunity for the council a year from now, ahead of budgeting for the 23, 24, to be able to make sure that what we didn't want to do is have the city staff, the DPW in particular, get caught off guard, and to give them an opportunity to be able to plan, looking a couple of years out, to be able to revisit and say, okay, yes, we're holding to this timeline. We're comfortable with the progress that A&R is making in the implementation of the permit, and now's our chance, as a city, to be able to adjust budgeting, et cetera, for the wastewater facility, to be able to manage that. So we just felt very comfortable with providing not only the state but also the city to be able to check in and make appropriate progress on what we're talking about.
Great, thank you.
Great job, guys.
Great letter.
Right, I want to go to either
Sure.
Bill or Chris.
I think we just had some minor comments about the letter. I don't think, Kurt, did you want to offer your suggestions? You don't have to, but.
Can I just say, Kurt, it's good to see you in person. For the first time in like 2 years.
Yeah, it's been a bit. Yeah, I'm not worried about my voice going to robot mode here.
I digress.
So I'm Kurt Monica, Deputy Director of Public Works. So I did provide a memo to council, just providing some additional information. Just want to kind of highlight some of the items in that. That's all right. One is there's PFAS in the influent. There's PFAS in every treatment plant. It is much higher in plants that do accept leachate. There is a high concentration of PFAS in leachate. So, but I wanted to just recognize that regardless of whether or not we take leachate from Casella, we're going to be having PFAS in our wastewater. One thought that we had is kind of following up on that is, would it make sense to do a treatment system at the plant rather than at the landfill? We did talk to Casella briefly about that. On Monday, we had a call with them. They're open to that concept. It's not really the direction they're looking at right now. Right now, they're looking at on-site. But I was kind of curious if council had interest in exploring that option. It's just something to think about. There's challenges. We can't accept all the leachate right now. in order for Casella to move forward with that, I think we'd have to increase our capacity for accepting leachate to that full scale, which would mean probably an aeration tank build out, so we could accept more BOD. But it's just one other option that that council may want to consider. As far as the timeline, I wanted to note that the timeline that council's looking at now is really to only have a pilot system in place at the landfill. So, in about a year and a half, Casella would have, under their permit, they'd have likely just the pilot, which would only treat maybe 10% of the leachate at the landfill. So they expect that there's a good chance there would be a reduction in the PFAS through that, but an elimination, full elimination, because it won't be the full-scale treatment system installed at that time. Really, it's 2025 that they're anticipating, because there's the permitting, construction. If you think about the upgrade we did at our plant, it took like 3 years. That was a design build project, fast-tracked with kind of known technologies. The technology for PFAS treatment is very new, and they have to go through a pilot system before they can prove out that it's going to work, whereas our project was known standard technology. So it is going to take longer. I don't see that it's possible to have full-scale PFAS treatment in a year and a half at either Montpelier or at the landfill. And just to follow up on that, complete elimination of PFAS, Casella maybe could speak to it more, but I'm not sure that would be possible either. I think, getting it maybe to drinking water standards or some level in that range could be feasible, but complete elimination, I'm not sure that that's achievable, but I'm not an expert on PFAS treatment, and these folks do know more about it than I do. And then, just a little bit on the environmental impacts. We're the closest treatment plant to the Coventry landfill. If it goes anywhere else, it's more trucking. So I just wanted to point out that there'll be more emissions. There's more diesel fuel used up. There's an environmental impact to bringing it other places beyond just the PFAS discharge. And then of course there is the financial impact. I think that's kind of, not the focus of the concerns, but it is real. It's probably going to be over $500,000. It will be over likely half a million annually if you consider the revenue loss and then our sludge disposal. So our sludge has roughly the same PFAS levels as treatment plants that do not accept leachate, but it does have PFAS in it, and it all goes to Coventry, and then it runs through the landfill, and the leachate comes back to Montpelier. So it is sort of this cycle. But I just wanted to point out that it will be a revenue impact. It's will be project potential impacts. It would affect the sewer master plan. We'd have to do some thinking about whether it's not rate increases or a cut to projects, but there would be a real impact to what we could do.
Yeah, questions. Connor, then Donna, and then I have some questions too, and then Jennifer.
Yeah, Kurt, what would be the benefit of treatment at the plant as opposed to at the landfill? I'm not sure I understand that.
Yeah, so well, like I said, all plants have PFAS in the influent. So it's not just leachate; it's what's coming down the pipe from all the residential users. So we could take out, we could treat all of the wastewater, not just the leachate that's coming to the plant. So you get a full treatment process.
So do we know what our level of PFAS is within what? Because you talk about all these different sources, and right now you quoted drinking water level, so there's a standard there. So if we have a measurement now and we continue it, is there a way to say we want this much reduction?
Yeah. So a couple of points on the sampling and testing is there is not an approved surface water test procedure right now. It's so new that it's just not fully developed and approved. There is a test procedure that's approved for drinking water, and that's essentially what's been being used for wastewater effluent. And we do have results from the state. I think it was 2019, there was a report put out by Weston and Sampson Engineering. So our influent levels based on that report are about 169 parts per trillion, and the effluent was 69 parts per trillion. Comparison to Northfield, which does not take leachate, they're at about 10 parts per trillion influent and 3 parts per trillion effluent. Drinking water EPA standard is 70. So our effluent currently meets the EPA drinking water standard. The Vermont drinking water standard is much less. It's 20 parts per trillion, which we do not meet with our effluent. But we're not making drinking water at the wastewater plant, obviously, but
Well, no, I was just going back, I mean, the statement in the letter that I thought you were addressing was no longer accept leachate that contains any detectable PFAS chemicals. So would you be more comfortable with that statement referring back to the drinking water level?
yes, I would recommend making that change. That
And-
meets and the Vermont standard is more stringent if council wanted to use that Vermont drinking water standard.
Okay, do we meet the 20 Vermont drinking water standard?
Not currently, no. Our effluent is, like I said, it's 69 parts per trillion.
I didn't get all the numbers,
Yep.
okay.
And EPA is 70,
Is 70.
but Vermont is 20.
Well, I mean, again, I'm just trying to think something that really is reachable. But if we don't meet this Vermont standard, we're trying to meet the Vermont standard. But
Yeah.
we can't do that until this pilot project gets done, right? And there's better treatment.
Right. No, I think, yes, we'd either have to stop taking leachate, or the leachate that we're receiving would have to be, treated to reduce the levels coming into the plant. So if council was interested in revising the wording to having the leachate meet the Vermont drinking water standard levels for PFAS, that I believe is achievable, but I'm not. I think I would defer to Casella. on
It
that.
still would be a goal. It'd be higher than where we're at.
Correct.
Okay. And likewise, the date that I heard you, which made sense in the timing of the pilot project, would be 2024, not 23.
The pilot project, I think, and again, I defer to Casella on the exact timing of this, because they're looking at the permitting process and everything else that would be required to build it. But I believe within a year and a half, the pilot project would likely be constructed. But that, again, only would treat a small portion of the leachate from the landfill. The full-scale
Yeah.
build out to treat all of the leachate is 2025,
Five,
is what they're
2025.
estimating.
Okay. Thank you.
Jennifer, go ahead.
I'm trying to figure out how to word this. So if we're saying that we don't want to long-term accept leachate, doing this build-out seems like a lot for something that we're not going to do long-term. And so what would happen with that building, or all the renovations that have to happen in order to take in excess amounts of leachate? What would happen?
Well, I think if there is interest in building a PFAS treatment system at the plant, I think we would need or would want to commit to a long-term agreement with Casella to accept the leachate. I mean, we wouldn't want to do that type of investment without having a long-term commitment.
Okay, thank you.
So this idea that we could treat for leachate in Montpelier, I'll just say for myself, it is very interesting to me, especially because we know that there's PFAS in what's coming in anyway, aside from the leachate. So if it's yeah, I feel like I just need more information about that, right? Like as a possibility, because that's a really interesting possibility. If it's just an aeration tank that doesn't, I mean, I'm sure that it's probably, like $1 million on its own, but it doesn't sound like a lot. Is there any way you could flesh that out a little bit? Like, what does that look like?
Well, the aeration tank project is probably a $5 million
Okay, 5 million, great,
project.
okay.
The other area we'd have to look at is the UV system, to make sure that there weren't issues with increasing our receiving and still maintaining our UV. We haven't explored it because I wasn't sure if there are interest
That's fair.
by council, so we haven't really gotten to any details, but that's kind of one of the questions that I wanted to bring up tonight.
Yeah, Lauren, go ahead.
Just tied to this line of questioning, I mean, are there opportunities to put in a better filtration system, knowing there's PFAS and other contaminants, I'm sure, anyway, on the site that isn't locking us into, isn't like accomplishing the Casella pretreatment, but is instead just a better filtration system for our own contaminants? And part of, like we had talked a little bit last time, but I know that there is specific PFAS contamination funding was part of the infrastructure bill that just passed for wastewater treatment facilities. So I would hope there would be potential funding opportunities around this. Who knows? I'm sure that's a competitive grant program and stuff, so nothing we could count on, but it seems worth looking into. I don't necessarily love the idea of locking us in to be the longtime off-taker of leachate, but I do like the idea of us better filtering our own system anyway, if that's an opportunity. But I don't know if you feel like they have to be, because like of the economics or the volume or something like that, they would have to be tied together.
Yeah, no, it certainly wouldn't have to be. It would be an economic challenge, just given the other needs in the sewer fund, CSOs, and there are still some aging infrastructure dealing with the solids disposal. So there's just a lot of other competing needs. It certainly could be done as a standalone project, but it would be a high cost.
Interesting. Any other questions or comments for Kurt? Okay. All right. Well, and I know we have some folks from Casella here, so if you'd like to come up and make any comments, you are welcome to do that. And then we'll go to the public, and then we'll chat. Yep.
Just move the mic if you're speaking. If you've been sitting in the back, you know.
Well, thank you, Mayor. We appreciate the opportunity. My name's Sam Nicolai. I'm Vice President of Engineering with Casella. Joe Gay is here. He's the engineer for Casella for all Vermont. Kim Crosby, sitting in the back, is our Director of Compliance. So we're happy to answer any questions. I guess maybe just a couple of remarks. We certainly understand and frankly support the city's desire to move forward with removal of the PFAS. Our primary concern is the timing. As Kurt kind of laid out, through the permit and through our engineering planning, we expect to be in the pilot by next year. So the pilot will actually 100% be operational in 2022, assuming that the agency and Act 250 can get us the appropriate permits. And so we'll absolutely see a reduction by July of 2023. I'm not convinced that we will be able to get full removal by then because we need time to scale the pilot system up. We hope to do that quickly. We hope that the pilot goes extremely well and the agency will support that permitting efforts. We have no reason to slow down. We have no reason to drag our feet on this. I actually had a conversation with John Casella even today that he fully supports us moving forward as quickly as we can. But I would encourage you to consider we need a little bit more time than that proposal to get full removal. We're hoping that we can scale up to the full system after the pilot, through 2023 and 2024 and be fully operational by the end of 2024. So by 2025, we're in really good shape. I wish I could give you, drop dead definitive deadlines on that, but we're just not there yet. And out of an abundance of caution and wanting to get it right, we want to make sure that we commit to that. A couple of other thoughts would be, we are committed to getting the pilot running at the landfill next year. We have the option to propose a pilot at the city. That is definitely an option. If the city's interested in looking at the potential to try to pilot something and see how it works, we would happily have further conversations with the city on that. And so that may be a way to sort of step into, is this an option for PFAS treatment at the city? And what does it look like? And what's it going to cost? And all those things. So that's certainly something that could be considered. That would have to be worked out over the next couple of months, but absolutely it could be considered. But other than that, I think we'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody from the council has.
Thank you. Questions? Yeah, go
If
ahead, Jay.
I could just jump
yeah,
into
go
it just
ahead.
for a second.
Absolutely, yeah.
I think it's important to know too that, I've been administering to this permit, the specific permit, in coordination with Bob Fisher before Chris was here. Since 1998, we've had a great relationship with the city of Montpelier. We do accept your trash, your waste that has the PFAS in it. We also accept, as Kurt mentioned, the sludge that comes in with about the equivalent amount of PFAS in it. We want to continue the partnership that we've had. We've worked really well with the city of Montpelier. We want to continue to do that. I think it's what's best for Vermonters. Sam didn't mention I live in Underhill. I'm a mountain biker. I love the Mamba trail network down here. So it is important. We take it serious. John's committed. The company's committed. We would like to partner and continue to partner with the city and work forward together. With a solution to this. We do have the permit. We've gone through the permit. We're going to sit down with Kurt and Chris tomorrow, go through some comments on the permit. We'll be responding with our own comments and look forward to starting. Vermont is on the leading edge of PFAS research. Now, we're going to be a big player with that, especially with the wastewater, and we're engaged and we're committed to, trying to figure it out.
Great. Thank you. All right, so questions for you all. So Jay, you had your hand up earlier. So I'd defer to you first and then Lauren. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to appreciate, I definitely appreciate the partnership, and I appreciate that there's, maybe, the timelines don't necessarily line up ideally. I'm curious, part of this conversation, we had at our last meeting and that in doing research, we've come to understand there may be a potential for storage where we as a city can commit to not be discharging the PFAS into our waterways even before, so that they can be captured and stored in whatever state before the final, whether it's end of 2024 or into 2025, before the pilot project has come online and they can be pulled out of the leachate. Is that something that's a possibility? How can that help us bridge that gap, I guess is my question.
I think if I understand it correctly, you're referring to one of the technologies that we're looking at has the ability, ideally, to pull PFAS out without having to do a lot of the treatment of the rest of the leachate. And if that were successful, then we would be able to pull PFAS out at the landfill and then continue to bring PFAS free or PFAS low, depending on how successful we are, leachate to the city of Montpelier. If that may be kind of what you're trying to get at.
Yeah, it's essentially hedging, like knowing that the technology might not necessarily be there yet, but being able to hold on to that before we're discharging it into the watershed. So yeah.
So under that scenario, even as once the pilot is operational, you would see an immediate reduction of PFAS coming to the city. You won't be PFAS free yet. But again, then the opportunity to take that pilot and scale it up would be the ideal goal.
Just to follow up on that directly. So in theory, if you did something like that at the city plant, could that pull out the PFAS from non-leachate as well?
I think that as all the research that we've done, if for the city, it's a different technology. I think everything that we've learned says that if a wastewater plant's going to try to get it, you're going to take all of your existing infrastructure, and then at the end, you're going to filter either with a resin or with carbon to remove the PFAS. You wouldn't use the same types of technologies that we would use for leachate directly.
Okay. All right, Lauren.
Thanks, really appreciate you being here and getting this information, and just credit where it's due. We did testify in parallel on upstream trying to get PFAS out of a range of products, which appreciated Casella's support on that legislation, and hope we can continue that as we all try to deal with the downstream generational contamination. I guess my question, so we heard from Kurt some concern over the level. Are we understanding right? We had previously heard that the actual treatment, if you did something like reverse osmosis, you could get it to a non-detect of PFAS in the treated water. Is that right? And is the idea that either you'd be looking to blend in some, or are there different technologies you're exploring that would be less clear? So when we had been thinking of a non-detect level, it would be the treated is what we'd be looking to ultimately get to for the city, and we'd just like to hear more about that.
Sure. So I would say our ultimate goal is to get all the PFAS. We're not going to advance a technology that only gets 75% of it. The goal would be to use technologies that are successful at treating. Getting to zero is always a difficult concept for anything, PFAS, anything else, which is why as a society, we have permits that have standards and you meet those standards. But our goal is to remove it, and we're not going to pick something that's only going to get part of it. Our goal is to get it all out. That doesn't mean that I can guarantee you that every drop will be 100% PFAS free. Nobody can guarantee you that. But I would say our stated goal is to remove all of it. I would say in the absence of a standard, A&R has asked us and is directing us to remove as much as we can. I will point out that by legislation, they have to have a surface water criteria in the state of Vermont by 2024. They don't have one today, but they have to by legislation. So by the time that we're fully operational, there will be a standard that will apply to you and to us and to everybody else.
And as mentioned earlier too, even for drinking water, the standard is 20 parts per trillion, not 0.
Yeah, go ahead, Lauren, and then we'll go to Donna.
Just one other follow-up. Do you know yet, I know you're still working through the pilot, like what % you anticipate would be going through the pilot program as you build it? I mean, do you have any estimates at this point?
How much leachate we would test through the
Yeah.
pilot? We don't. We haven't settled on it. We estimated that we were going to be in the 10 to 25% range, but I'll be honest and say I don't know yet. We will know in a few months, but we're not quite there yet.
Thanks.
Donna.
So you partly answered one of my questions. Right now, you're saying you don't know exactly what standard you'll be at until you're into the pilot project. But yet you said you felt very clearly by 2023, there would be a decrease. So you would just be guessing on what you've read about the treatments, of what that decrease would be? And I'm asking because I'm really working for what I call a true statement, that if we can ask for a standard that is reachable, such as the drinking water standard or the federal standard by 2023, or another standard by 2024. So I'm trying to be reasonable here.
I would say, I'll say it this way. Our goal and our understanding of the technologies is that those technologies are designed and will remove the vast majority of PFAS out of what's treated. Why I hedge in the reduction part is mostly based on volume. We just won't be treating all of it by that point. We think what we will treat will be as close as we can to non-detect. We just won't be treating all the volume. And so that's why I'm concerned that we can't say to the city of Montpelier, we're going to bring you no PFAS in our leachate by 2023. Does that help?
Okay, so, and likewise, if we treat it on site, you treat it on site at the landfill, and solid waste plant treats it there, would that, because that would also cover all the stuff that comes from our homes. Would that get
Correct.
closer?
If I would say that, again, it would be a different set of technologies, but the goal and the expectation would be if you treated at the plant, that you would be treating all of it and would be trying to get as close to zero as technology allows us to do it.
Okay, and Kurt, I have a question for you. Do you know now how much comes from our homes and how much comes from the landfill? Is it separated that way? Any way to separate it?
Yeah, well, we don't have exact numbers, but we just have a comparison to the wastewater plant in Northfield, which does not take leachate.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, it is, the majority of it is in the leachate. I mean,
Yes, yes.
probably, you know, almost 90%.
90%.
You know, roughly in the ballpark.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? I have a follow-up question. Also not sure how to word this. So a couple things. One is, are you, in your view, is it sort of an either or in terms of if the city treats it, you all would not, or is it sort of is there the possibility of both? I mean, to be fair, that's
I think
probably
it's an either or, just based on, you know, I'll let Sam chime in, but I think just based on the sheer cost of what it's going to be to put a full system in, I think it's one or the other.
And I'm just, Kurt, would you agree with that? Okay. For the leachate, yeah. And as a separate question, if we, I mean, y'all have mentioned like, yeah, you're committed to treating the PFAS. I think I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Does that commitment extend beyond whatever we decide to do, or is it dependent on our decision to take leachate or not?
We're committed to removing PFAS from the leachate, period.
Period.
We're hopeful that not only in the short term, but in the long term, we can continue the partnership with the city. And one of the technologies that we mentioned would be most viable to pre-treat and then bring it to the city. And then in that case, you would be looking at a potential long-term opportunity to work with us.
Yeah.
But yes, I think in answer to your question, we're committed to the removal one way or the other.
Okay, great, thank you. That's good to know. Lauren, go ahead.
Just on the technology, so you were describing one that it seems particularly designed to remove PFAS. Does that address other contaminants, or is it really like somehow attracting the PFAS chemical or something? Like, would we be getting leachate with, do different technologies, are you assessing them by a broader suite of contaminants or just really focused on PFAS?
The one technology that I was referencing that focuses more on the upfront is based around the idea of foaming, which PFAS likes to do. So it would primarily get PFAS. It will get some other contaminants, but there would still need to be substantial treatment after that. So thus the need to continue to bring it to the wastewater plant. If you're, the alternative, of course, is looking at RO, and RO, you're going to get clean water out the other side. It's going to treat everything. So obviously there are differences in costs and how those are handled, but
RO being reverse osmosis. Yeah. Great. Other questions? Connor, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we've heard it from others, but just from the horse's mouth, if we didn't take the leachate, where would it go?
Yeah, so that's one of my responsibilities for the company is to have contingencies upon contingencies upon contingencies like the landfill does itself. We have redundancy built in there for the environment. In this case, to answer your question, we are permitted to go to Plattsburgh, New York, Concord, New Hampshire, Franklin, New Hampshire, and now with this permit amendment, it would be you guys. So if you guys said no, Plattsburgh, Concord, Franklin. And certainly we're going to continue to explore more options to be able to treat it. But since I've been with the company since 1998, we've had essentially 5 locations where we've been able to take leachate. And I'd like to speak to the New Hampshire out-of-state leachate just for 1 second. It does sound like you've made up your mind that you don't want it. I just want to offer that I have 2 landfills I'm responsible for, one in New Hampshire and one in Vermont. And the leachate primarily goes to Concord from the New Hampshire site and primarily comes here for the Vermont site. But there's times Chris will call me up and say, you know, we've got something going on, we're upgrading and we got to be down for 2 weeks. I can't take your leachate for 2 weeks, which happens. It's really not that uncommon. So I'm in a role where I need to be able to say, okay, I've got a place to take the leachate while the plant's down. So it goes to Concord. The same thing happens in Concord. Concord goes down for whatever reason, and the New Hampshire leachate needs to go somewhere. If, you know, there's more limitations in this permit, so it's going to be a little bit more problematic down the road. But I would call Chris and say, Chris, can I take 2 loads of Coventry, Vermont leachate, and 2 loads of the New Hampshire leachate to get us through the period that Concord can't take it? And in the past, we've been able to do that. So it would be unfortunate if we didn't have that provision to do that. And it's very rare, but it does happen from time to time.
Go ahead. Does the same happen in Vermont? Are we down and we need to go somewhere?
Yes.
How often? Once a year, twice a year?
So we're going to Plattsburgh a lot. We've been to Plattsburgh a lot this year with some of the plant upgrades and so forth. I don't think the Vermont leachate's gone to Concord at all this year, and I don't think the New Hampshire leachate has come here at all this year. In 2021, I don't even think it happened in 2020, to be honest with you. So yeah, it's very rare, but it does happen. And it just provides some flexibility for the operations of these landfills.
Thank you. Lauren, go ahead.
I was just curious, is that landfill going through the same pretreatment technology, or is the Vermont one like the trial pilot project?
Vermont is really leading the Northeast, if not much of the country, with moving forward on this. So New Hampshire has done some testing, but doesn't yet have the framework in place to consider what are going to be the standards and how that's going to be treated, landfill or not landfill.
Great.
The wastewater plants are regulated very differently too between the 2 states.
Jack.
I don't know if you'll have the answer to this question. When Peter Walk was here last week, I asked him this and he thought it was just too imponderable or whatever to really give me an answer. But I'll try it with you guys too, because you're actually handling the material. If Montpelier just said, stop it, we're not taking any more. We're looking at 2 different possible courses of action. One is we take it, subject it to conditions and limitations. The other is just say, forget it, we're done. Which one of those, not for Montpelier, but for the whole water system of Vermont and the region, which one of those would lead to a better long long-term region-wide outcome.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Can you, I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
the idea is that whatever happens in Montpelier is not going to change the fact that there's PFAS in our wastewater and in the solid waste stream. So what's the best way to reduce and eventually eliminate the chemicals from the waste stream and from the environment?
So Lauren actually mentioned it earlier. When the emerging contaminants were first identified, we and a lot of other people said the very first thing we've got to do is stop producing this material. The landfills and the wastewater plants are at the end. They're the sinks where all this material is ending up. And as long as we as society keep making Gore-Tex jackets and fabrics and carpets and everything else that's got this stuff on it, we're going to be producing it. The good news is you've got a voluntary ban in place in the US. You've got manufacturers stopping using it, and you've got documented blood levels that are dropping. So I think 98% of all adults in the United States have detectable concentrations in their blood. That's the bad part. The good part is the chart shows that those levels are dropping each year. So the more material we stop using, the less this stuff is produced, the better off we're going to get. Unfortunately, all of us, including you and me and everybody in this room, has got carpets and fabrics and jackets and everything else sitting in their houses that are going to have to be dealt with over the next 20 years. And so it's going to take some time before we are able to resolve it. But the positive thing is that we're on the right path. We just got to keep moving it forward.
And as people's blood concentration is going down, I assume that's because over time it's being excreted, and so that winds up in our wastewater and going through our sewer plants again.
That's exactly right.
And presumably, we've got, again, no fault of companies, but we have landfills full of this stuff that's going to take years to process too. It doesn't just all, so even if we're could completely stop in production, we've still got decades probably of stuff to process. To get to Jack's question, I'm going to try to see if I can frame it just slightly differently. I think the question is if Montpelier were to the choice is Montpelier keeps taking it, you work the program you're talking about, or we just say stop and you have to figure it out somewhere else. Between those two options, which of those would result in the best overall, not just for Montpelier, but the overall environmental outcome? And or is that impossible to answer?
That's exactly the question, yes.
So the practicality is if Montpelier stopped taking it tomorrow, it would primarily go to Plattsburgh. There are opportunities in Concord and in Franklin, but for the most part, it would go to Plattsburgh. And so it's the same watershed. It's going directly, eventually, into the same Lake Champlain watershed. So the only thing that would change in the short term is we would be carrying leachate further, more diesel being used, more trucks to a further endpoint. So from that standpoint, it's a worse outcome for the overall environment. Now, that's not an argument to keep the status quo, right? We all want to see this stuff be removed. We all want to proceed forward, and we fully support that. But in the most immediate short term, the only thing that changes is we're hauling leachate to a further location with more emissions, and it's costing, people will say, oh, it's costing Casella. It's not costing Casella. It's costing Vermonters in every waste that comes into the landfill. I hope that helps.
And I wanted to follow up if I could on that. One of the concerns that was expressed by a state official, I can't remember who it was that the that Vermont, because Vermont is on the leading edge, if you were to take it to Plattsburgh or New Hampshire, their requirements aren't as stringent as Vermont's are right now for discharge of it. So would you have the same incentive to continue doing the pretreatment that you're talking now if you were not being required to do so in those other states? I heard you say we're committed to doing it, but would your time frame change, or don't you want to not answer that in public? I get that too.
Our commitment is to remove it. We don't view hauling leachate out of state as any kind of acceptable long-term solution for Vermonters. So we expect that we're going to work through this process. We expect that it's not going to be easy. The technologies are not as proven as we would like, or in some cases, and ultimately, even these technologies, they're separation technologies. All we're doing is pulling PFAS out of leachate and getting it in some other media that has to be dealt with. So all that has to be shaken out. But our commitment is to move that forward independent of how things, addressed in Montpelier. Having said that, as Joe pointed out, we've had a long relationship with the city. We would love to see that relationship continue and us to be partners in removing this.
Thank you for answering that.
Thank you. Jay and then Donna.
I think your point is very well taken, and I appreciate the impact of what it would mean to ship it out of state in the scenario that if we decided tomorrow not to take it anymore. But I think that's exactly why we proposed to stop taking it about 19 and a half approximately, a year and a half from now, not tomorrow. Because we want to keep this, we want to be in a position where we're keeping this process moving forward, and that you're incentivized to develop this pilot program and to look for alternatives, so that we don't want to paint you in a corner. That's the last thing we want to do. We don't want to just say, hey, that's it, forget it, we're not taking it, deal with it, because we understand what the environmental impacts of that would be. We also don't want to be putting these PFAS in our waterways. I know it's the same watershed, but we're talking, in our backyards, in rivers and streams that our kids are playing in on a daily basis. So I think that's why we felt it was a very reasonable, but also motivational time frame to establish, where a year and a half from now, that's when we would do it. It's not just tomorrow and you're stuck, but there's motivation, an opportunity for you to work towards better alternatives. So I just wanted to make that point. I appreciate your points in that it's got to go somewhere, right? And it's not a solution that you can just obviously, if it could have been figured out overnight, it would have been, but it's going to take some time. But at the same time, we have a role to play in what we're willing to accept in our own in the watersheds that our community engages with. So, thanks.
I know you mentioned earlier the idea of asking A&R for regular updates, and I would offer to you, we will provide updates on whatever frequency you would like. If you would like us to come and at the same time or at separate times, Joe and I are happy to do so and tell you what's going on. How's your progress? How are we meeting these goals? We'd be happy to do that.
Thank you. Donna.
I do think it is, quote, our purchase, our waste in the landfill. It's ours to deal with. So I really want to work with you and the pilot project. I really want us to push our Agency of Natural Resources. I think that's the one who we're really directing this letter at more than you, because they have the resources to help us do this and do it better continuously. And if indeed we keep 2023, I would see changing some of the standard in that sentence. We could then modify it at that point and say, okay, this is where we are. Where can we be in another year? Is that hard for you as a business? If indeed we're reviewing this every year and then saying, okay, we're going to do it for this year, but we're going to ask for this much change, and this year, this much change. Is that too tentative for you as a business?
Could be. It depends on the results. I don't think that's an unreasonable ask. I think that as long as we have the ability to come to you and say, hey, this worked really well, oh, this didn't work really well,
Yep.
and we have ups and downs, and you're willing to work with us on that, I would say we support that. Again, we're being transparent here in our desire to move forward and be successful. If I could tell you exactly what number that I could meet, I would, so that we all could be comfortable with it.
Okay, because likewise, I see us just leaving it in the landfill. If we're not doing part of the pilot project, it's not being treated, it's not improving. So we don't have any chance. So to me, to be a partner and be part of the pilot project, to me, is working towards a solution and not just dumping it further down the road. So thank you.
I think it's worth too, and extending an invitation to come up and get a tour of the landfill. We do that to all the council members. I think it would be very helpful and worth your time.
Thank you. All right, any other questions for these folks for now? Okay, all right, thank you. And we may have further questions even later, but appreciate your taking the time. This was very valuable. And so at this point, I want to turn to the public. I'm going to start with folks in person, though I'm guessing that there's nobody from the public who would like to make.
Appears to be city or Casella staff.
Yes,
It's here.
or my mother.
One other person.
Yeah, that's okay. That's my mom.
Oh. Oh.
Yeah, my mom came.
Mrs. Watson wish to comment?
Yeah, Mom, do you want to comment? No, okay, great. All right, just checking. Okay. All right, so virtually, yeah, any folks will wish to comment? You can just wave too if you would like to. Okay, Daryl Bloom, go ahead.
Thank you for letting me speak. I'm mightily impressed by the depth of the questions and the information and the participation by Casella and the mutual goals here of protecting the waterways and the people who drink them. I really appreciated the letter as it is drafted. The fact that you were asking for tight oversight for the pilot project seems excellent to me, and the increased monitoring. I do have a couple of thoughts that I'd like to add. One is that it seems to me that as much as I can, I understand that this is not the time to set standards for the levels of PFAS in the water, and that standards are expected from the EPA in a year or so. But it would seem to me that it would be wise to have parameters, points at which the ANR would say, oh, that's too high, and that then ANR would have an action plan for what to do when the monitoring said that's too high, whatever it would be, if it was the EPA standard for drinking water or I don't know, but that seems to be an ANR responsibility to say what would be too much and to have a plan to say, what do we do if it gets too high, either from the leachate or from the discharge. And then the other thing that has been referred to, and I'm sure it's being worked on, it's just not being talked about at this meeting, but I couldn't resist commenting on the need for ANR to be working with whomever is the right party to figure out how to hold the sludge, store the sludge until we know what to do with it. Because that seems to me that it's foolish to send it back to the landfill. It's an opportunity for those little buggers to squeak by us. And we don't know what to do with it because we don't know how to break this chemical down yet. So I am just advocating that it seems to be somebody should be looking for a way to store the sludge, and that I don't know if it would be appropriate for that comment to be a part of your letter or not. Those are my comments. Thank you for letting me speak. And I'm Daryl Bloom, and I'm a resident of Montpelier.
Thank you very much. Anyone else virtually?
Can you guys hear me?
I'd like
Yeah.
to speak.
Go ahead, Nat, and then we'll go to Shayna.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Okay, good. There are two things in my mind. One is that there are some jurisdictions who have opted out already. There used to be Newport, and I think there used to be Essex, and there may well have been other communities that have opted out of the leachate program. Am I right on this or wrong?
That's accurate, but carry on.
So do we know why? Do we know why they decided to stop taking leachate? Is there a narrative here that we need to pay attention to? So that's a question. In some ways, I think this meeting should include, and maybe it does include, and maybe the agency of environmental conservation, or whatever it's called at the moment, maybe they are in the loop. I don't know that they are in the loop, but the people who are working on withdrawing those chemicals from the marketplace need to be a part of this discussion, and need to be, we can't just deal with it on the leachate treatment side. We've got to deal with on the marketplace side. And the imperative has to be clear, and the energies need to be connected. I don't know whether I'm making a point that's being understood. I hope so. I wonder, here's a third question. I wonder whether the affected communities drawing water from the Lake Champlain watershed or from Lake Champlain itself, I wonder whether those communities are made aware that there are sending communities like Montpelier are sending this stuff through the ecosystem into the Lake Champlain watershed, and possibly affecting the health of people who are drawing water from that watershed. Is there a connection there as well? So these are at least three concerns. And thank you for inviting me and others to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Nat. Did you want to answer any of those questions? I mean, if not, that's fine. I wanted to wait till Nat had a chance to say his piece. If you want to address it, great. If not, that's okay.
I guess the only comment I would add is that historically, leachate went to two locations in Vermont, Newport and Montpelier, and to a much lesser extent to several other facilities which were served primarily as backups. It no longer goes to Newport because of an Act 250 determination, not because of a A&R nor a City of Newport determination. So that's the only change that has resulted in leachate no longer going to the City of Newport.
The former permit also allowed us to take 1 load a day to Barry with a very low BOD limit. And the size of the tankers now didn't warrant us to go there. So we just let that drift off of the permit. Essex Junction was another facility. They lay and apply their sludge, and there is some concerns about PFAS. We don't even take leachate to Essex, and so that's the issue there. The City of Burlington also took our leachate, and we collectively with the City of Burlington opted out only because they don't have the storage infrastructure for the leachate for storage to be dosed into the system. So those are the reasons.
Thank you. All right, Shayna, and then I'm gonna go to the bathroom. Don't want any of you.
Sorry about that. I'll make it quick. I've
okay.
been having computer
No
problems,
worries.
so apologies. Can you guys hear me if I'm on my
Yes.
phone for audio? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Shana Casper, District 2 resident, City Montpelier, and Community Action Works, and co-facilitated the National PFAS Contamination Coalition. I also just wanted to raise attention to the fact that the EPA released data yesterday that suggests that, new tox data for 2 PFAS that show that they're extremely more toxic than previously understood, which could trigger a really drastic reduction in what is considered acceptable amounts in drinking water. And so the EPA report shows that PFOA and PFOS were found to cause health problems at thousands of times lower reference doses than previous known. And the reference dose is the maximum amount of chemical that can be ingested, but that doesn't result in an increased risk of cancer or other health disorders. And the EPA, forwarded the science to its Science Advisory Board for review, and if they agree, that could really lower the federal health advisory limit for these chemicals, 14,000 times. In Vermont, we already regulate lower than the federal government for our drinking water protections. And we're regulating, 6 PFAS in our drinking water. And the most common testing methods for drinking water in Vermont, so EPA method 537 and the draft method of 1633 for surface water, do test for more PFAS. These are 40 PFAS compounds. And so standards are coming, and we don't want our standards to be in the way of that, as we've been talking about. And thinking for Montpelier testing, we could look at what, cumulative of those PFAS, of kind of what we would be seeing as appropriate risk for that. Also, just wanting to note that there's, $8 billion in the infrastructure bill that just got signed on Monday for small scale water systems, as has been noted. And I also kind of want to echo what Donna has said, is that I don't necessarily, I'm just like raising all these as points, but that doesn't seem like there's really a decision to make. It seems like we've got a letter written by the city to A&R, and it seems like there is general consensus around it, save for some small changes around the testing methodology. And this letter calls for, PFAS-free leachate, and calls for encouraging the state to move quickly and with more oversight on the monitoring and oversight on the implementation of the treatment technology, and want to call on the state to up their oversight and do more monitoring, and to move forward with pilot projects. I just want to make sure that as we're kind of raising all these different issues and having a lot more conversations, that we're not getting too distracted by the signing and the sending of this letter from the city. So just wanting to, voice my encouragement and support for that. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? And I'll be right back.
Anybody else in Zoom land who is trying to be recognized? I'm not seeing any hands up. But I want to make sure everyone who wants to be heard is heard. Okay, we'll go back to council. Donna?
Well, I just want to, particularly Lauren and Jay, who wrote the letter, if indeed there's any openness to modifying the sentence about the July 1, 2023, will no longer accept leachate that contains any detectable. Do you have any give on that statement? Are you willing to modify it?
I think that's where we are.
Yeah,
Council discussing the language and what
so I'm
we
asking.
should adopt. Go ahead.
I mean, one thought, so part of what I heard this evening is there's different technologies that get a different level of outcome, like reverse osmosis is more expensive, but you get a cleaner product. If, I don't know if this is true, but if our standard is pushing towards adoption of the better technology, where, and maybe there's a 1 part per trillion or something that gives some of the wiggle room that like 0 is always hard for anything. But I mean, I do the study Shayna referenced and stuff. I mean, I think those standards are, the EPA ones are really high. I think the state one, I think all of this, as we learn more, it continues to be, they're worse than we thought, and the standards keep going down and down and down. So I want to be both realistic, keep us on track, but know that these chemicals are just, the more we learn, the worse they are at really low concentration. So I don't want to set too high a standard. And, I mean, I could see if we're able to take, for example, pre-treated reverse osmosis water that's come out the other end as part of this, then maybe we're able to live up to that, and it's a portion, and then some other portion is going elsewhere in a year and a half. So I'm open to other people's input, but if we're able to encourage better technology that gets to lower output or cleaner water, that's my motivation of trying to stick really tight on.
Yeah, I was just asking that within the year that they're going to have, and part of that is starting the pilot project, if indeed you would accept something closer to like the Vermont drinking water standard just for that first year. And you can say no, that's okay.
Jack, go ahead.
I'm curious, and I'm glad the guys from Casella are still at the table, because I'm curious. I heard you say, well, reverse osmosis system can get you to essentially 0. If we were to say, well, you have to get to 0, and you, from your perspective, know that the only way to realistically accomplish that is to do a reverse osmosis system, which I gather is a lot more expensive. Would you then make the choice to say, well, we can't afford that, we will continue on what we think is a reasonable and realistic technology path, and if that means we can't take our leachate to Montpelier, then we might as well send it to Plattsburgh?
I would say our goal is to find the right technology to get us as close to 0 as we can, because ultimately a full-scale system is going to be millions of dollars of capital. And to Shayna's point, it's likely that over the coming years, the standards are going to continue to change. We're going to find out more information. So we're not going to be in the rat race of getting to 5 and then having a standard drop and then get to 3. Our goal is to find the right technology to get the PFAS out. My hesitation about the 2023 date is mostly, if not entirely, volume, not concentration. We don't intend to somehow select something that's only going to get partial treatment. It's only about our ability to treat the volume of leachate in that time frame.
Yeah, I think it's clear that the standard is going to be lower, and what I'm envisioning is that detection capabilities will become much greater. So the standards we're going to see maybe parts per quadrillion, right? That's the way these things go, right? My own perspective on this is that I like the idea of a standard or a deadline and maintain the pressure. But there are a couple of ways of doing it. One is to say, if we're creating a deadline or a deadline that you're saying now, it's just not realistic that you're ever going to get there. I'm not sure that there's a point to establishing that as the deadline. And so it might be better to have a farther out deadline while also reserving the right to get out of the contract if it doesn't appear that adequate progress is being made. And obviously the alternative is to say we're going to establish a deadline, but we'll kick it out if it looks like things are going well and they just need more time to meet it. Either way, I think that we'll want to have some flexibility in it as we see how things progress.
I'll just state the obvious that you control your own destiny, and you will in 6 months from now, and you will a year from now. So you have the ability to say something to us at some future date. We're just trying to convey to you that today, I don't believe that I can tell you that we will get 100% of the PFAS out by July 2023. I do understand the goals of wanting to send messages and convey a desire by the city. Fully understand that. But from a practicality standpoint, we won't be there by July of 2023, I don't believe.
I have a bunch of thoughts, but go ahead, Jay. Just put myself in line.
All right. My inclination, I absolutely appreciate Shayna's comments and your feedback, and I appreciate that we can have it feels like we have a shared goal here, and I appreciate that we can collaborate on this and try to find the best path forward. I have to say that my inclination is to not waver on a deadline, but to acknowledge that if there is a moving target, that it's around what the standards are. And right now, the best standard that we have is what is, in my opinion, is the Vermont standard, which is 20 parts per trillion for drinking water, correct? Which is different than the EPA standard. So to Donna's original question is, I would prefer if we're going to try to sort of quantify this, is that we hold to the deadline, but we use that as the best available standard now. So July 1, 2023, then that would be what we'd be willing to accept. But knowing that that standard, as we're learning more about the impact of these, and as we're developing technology to move us towards a level of zero, that we still hold the deadline, but we use that as at that point as an acceptable standard, but knowing that we could revisit that standard, not the deadline. My 2 cents. Yeah.
It sounds like we're moving towards the direction of some kind of agreement, which I think is encouraging. I appreciate the distinction between either we're messing with the deadline, or one variable is the deadline, one variable is the concentration, right? And one of the things that I heard through this is that either Vermont or the EPA is going to have some surface water standards by 2024, which is not the same timeline that we have been talking about. My thinking had been, well, what if we say that we'd like it to meet whatever established surface water standards come out in 2024. That's the goal. Or if we keep it for, or in the absence of that, then we go to the Vermont drinking water standard. If for whatever reason, the body that doesn't, that's supposed to put out those standards doesn't, that we have something to fall back on. But that would be a 2024 thing. If we keep 2023, having some standard, whether it's the Vermont drinking water standard or the EPA standard, I think is fair. The more strict one seems good. The question what I could picture happening as a result of that is that we would potentially, because it sounds like it's really a question of volume at that point, like how much we would be taking, right? Because if you're substantially treating a small volume, then it's sort of like how much else can you add into that to send to us? And is that a truckload's worth? If it's not a truckload's worth, then it wouldn't be worth sending, I assume. That's math that I don't know if that's even a fair question to ask you. Would that even work out to be worth sending to Montpelier at that point? I don't know if that question is clear.
Well, I think we would send you a truckload. If you would take
okay.
a truckload, we'd send you a truckload.
Okay,
The permit allows for 60,000 gallons a day.
Yeah.
Irrespective of the pilot study, it's 60,000 gallons a day, which is not all the leachate that we produce.
Okay, thank you.
At times.
That's helpful. One of the things that I also really appreciate is that you all are committed to doing this regardless of what we say, right? In a sense, that takes the pressure off of us. When I think about Jack's question of like big picture, what's the best for the environment? In part, it's like, well, they're going to do this work regardless of what we do. Now, to be fair, I have faith in the state of Vermont, and I like our standards. And so I want to believe that there's still some value to us having that pressure. And being a part of the dialogue and the relationship with A&R and with Casella moving through this. There's one other thought I had about this. This is a little bit of a minor detail on the broad scope of it all, but in terms of testing, I think it may, in the section that asks that we would like to have monthly testing, I think it makes sense for us to have both upstream and downstream testing, both of those, because it's really a question of what are we adding at that point, or like how effective is this for our community? And in part, I actually kind of wonder if it would be worth doing, it would be great to have that testing done now so that we have some kind of a baseline, so that when the pilot kicks in, we'd be able to compare it and see like, oh yeah, it is dropping. This is effective, or it's not, and we can reevaluate. Sorry, I have a lot of thoughts. Another thing, by putting it out to 2023 or 2024 or whenever, this council would still have an opportunity to revisit that if for whatever reason, circumstances change, or we, want to either tighten things or loosen things or whatever works. So in a sense, anything that we say beyond this, beyond our terms, right, is aspirational. That's fine, but I think that's still okay. I just want to acknowledge that. Last thought, between the prospect of having a sort of an in-house treatment versus treatment at the landfill, if it was an either or, you can't have both, my inclination would be to have it be at the landfill, because because 90% of the leachate that of the PFAS that we're processing comes from the leachate. And one of the things I'm interested in is exportability, I guess, of like if you all can prove that this works and is a good system, and other landfills decide that they also want to jump on board, then that's potentially an easier model to replicate than one that came off of a much smaller site like ours, or, you know, we're not treating as much PFAS. If anything I've said in there is not accurate, I welcome correction, but so there was, I just said a whole bunch of things. Curious for further thoughts. Yeah, Jay and then Donna.
Well, just a minor thing is one thing that, you know, Lauren and I talked about, and maybe we could have been a little more specific, but we did include language that said the testing, while would be more frequent, would also happen, we said at a variety of sites. And so the implication would be that it's not just like, you know, 10 feet downstream from where it's being released. So we could add, we could very easily set a variety of sites, including upstream and downstream, from releases from the treatment plant. So anyways, yeah.
Donna, and then Jennifer. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Well, I felt you were leaning to 2024, and I'll just put it out there. I think I'm a minority. I lean to 2024 just because of the pilot project and what we've heard around the other standards coming out. At that point, we would know a lot more to go to the next step. But I also heard that I do think eventually we'll have to treat that 10% that's happening now at our plant. And so if we don't start it now, we start it later. It just costs more. But maybe the technique's way better. But we do have that 10% we still have to deal with at our plant. And then it hasn't been talked about except in the discussion with Casello, but the statement here, no longer accepting out of state, I do feel that may need to be tempered. And so I wondered if there's a way to say, not accept any regular out of state or only emergency out of state. I think our plant itself has to sometimes take things out of state, go somewhere else. And so if we're doing it, again, only on those exceptions, and maybe you can give us some language of what that would be, I think we need to tone that to go, because we also sometimes need that exception. Okay.
Jennifer. Jen,
you can go. Thank you. I appreciate y'all being here. This is probably not the easiest thing for you to do. I have a very strong feeling about this, and I am just going to keep it to myself because I think I am the only one who has this strong of a feeling about it. But I would like to just personally defer to y'all's letter. I feel like you've done a lot of work and a lot of research, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you want to kind of hold firm on some things. So that's all I'm going to say on this. I'm not going to say anything further, but thank you for being here.
Okay. Sorry. Sorry, go ahead, Lauren, and then Jack. Yeah. Sorry.
First, on your monitoring suggestions, I just emailed some suggested language for that paragraph. So it would just read, getting to the paragraph or the sentence that I made a change. We also urge a broader suite of testing for likely leachate contaminants, including and beyond PFAS chemicals at a variety of both upstream and downstream sites around the wharf, and baseline testing as soon as possible so we can better understand the impacts of the pilot program as it comes online.
Oh, yeah, great. Okay.
Does that address what you were trying to? And just on the timeline and standard, I mean, I would rather stick with 2023. I think we can revisit. I think part of what we're calling for here is regular check-ins with A&R. Appreciate Casella's offer to be part of that and keep us updated. So I think, you know, the future council could adjust, but just keeping us on track. It's already a year and a half of continuing to, take this. If we're going to do a standard, if people aren't comfortable with the non-detect, which would mean that we were just able to take basically the pre-treated small volume that had gone through the pilot, which could be one option. And maybe if we wanted to go that route, then maybe we set it at like 1 part per trillion just to give a little bit of, just getting to 0 for anything's hard. But alternatively, I guess I would say the state drinking water standard would be the other one if people aren't comfortable with both 2023 and non-detect or 1 part per trillion. Personally, I'd love to see it combined 20 parts per trillion for all of the PFAS that are being tested. We very well, it could be, which is not our drinking water standard, to be clear. So we're testing for more, but knowing how concerning these all are, that could mean that our test is showing 400 parts per trillion of a PFAS chemical. It just doesn't happen to be one of the 5 that our state has regulated due to lack of scientific data, even though all evidence points to, concerns at least about all PFAS in the class. So that's one thought that is more protective. We'll be testing for it anyway, so we could tie it to, the EPA standard, the monitoring that's going to be happening anyway.
Well, team, I think we need to make some kind of decision. Jack?
I move that we set the timeline at, keep the timeline in 2023 and set the standard at 20.
Parts per trillion?
Yeah. I don't know if it requires a motion, because we're just kind of discussing it, but
Yeah,
just
we can
to
discuss
get it moving.
Yeah, that's good. It's good. Is there a second?
And that would be with the updated language that Lauren
Yes.
included.
Is there a second? Okay, all right, so Jay is seconding. Further discussion?
I really want to hear what Jennifer's really thinking.
I know.
It's not directed towards anyone, it's a cultural thing, and what we have done to this planet breaks my heart. And so the fact that we even have to have this conversation is really hard for me. And just thinking about what's going on with all of our water systems all over the planet. And it's a hard conversation to have. And I don't think a lot of people think about it when they're shopping and when they're doing their lives. And, I have small kids and you have one coming, and, we're leaving a huge mess for the next 7 generations, and it's very hard. So I'm not angry at anybody in particular. It's a hard place to be in
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
To be honest, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, if you just look at the genesis of the lined landfill, there are the reasons why we have a lined landfill is to protect the environment for those reasons.
Right.
Now, because we have to collect that wastewater, which is a good thing,
Mhm.
right? At least we can capture it. It's not going into the environment willy-nilly. We can control it and manage it, and what we're talking about tonight.
Yeah.
I think we are trying to all work towards the right goal, and that's to, and have the safest drinking water as humanly possible.
Yeah. And we're between a rock and a hard place, and we put ourselves there, and that's the big picture that is the hard thing to swallow, I think.
Agreed.
Jack?
I was going to say this earlier, and hearing what Jennifer said, I agree with everything you just said. And this is a problem that's not a Montpelier problem, and we're not doing this to say we don't want this in Montpelier water. We're protecting the environment for the whole watershed that affects the whole state. But I bet they're not having this debate in city council meetings all around the state. I bet we're the only ones, because we're the ones who have the plant. And so we're responsible for doing what we can to protect everyone's environment.
Yeah, Connor?
Yeah, so but probably not like directly to the motion, but are we just having a general chat?
Yeah,
here? There was a motion and then,
I'll leave it to you.
so like, first I want to thank you guys for coming in, and I think it does put my mind at ease to know the direction you're coming from. And I also want to say to the wastewater plant guys, we're probably putting you through the mill on this, but like, in my mind, you walk on water, treated water, but like, so none of this is like, none of this is criticism. But I just want to be honest, though, I'm hanging by a thread to continue taking this, right? It's, I want to profess I'm a bit ignorant on the science, so when you talk like parts per trillion, a lot of this is going over my head. What worries me is like, okay, we hear the levels are different, or much different in Northfield as opposed to our discharge place here. I think we have to ask the question, like, okay, we all consume this, we all have a responsibility to do this, and we should be accountable towards it. But are we putting residents of Montpelier and our region at disproportionate public health risk by being the one discharge point in the state for all of this? Because I don't feel we're responsible for the leachate coming out of New Hampshire. I don't feel like it's the rest of the state. And I think what I'm grappling at, and probably everybody is, okay, what's better for the environment overall, and what direct responsibility do we have for the people of this community, whether to take this or not? Because I'll be honest, you feel like you're a bit of a sucker, the only ones taking it in the state. Why did everybody say we're not taking it? So I'm worried about even putting like a deadline a year from now to reassess this. If it comes back a quarter from now and it doesn't look good, I want to be able to say no thanks, And again, it's no criticism to anybody. Everybody's working in the same direction on this. But when you're the only ones doing it, you ask the questions, right? So I don't know if anybody's telling me we are not putting our folks at a disproportionate public health risk by having this the one discharge point. If I'm wrong on that, I'm happy to learn more, and I do want to continue being educated on this, but I mean, that's the only conclusion I can come to in my head at this point.
Thank you, Connor.
No.
Yeah, so you guys, whatever you need to do, we certainly support. I've given this a lot of thought, just as our role as manager in the community. And unfortunately, in our society, and particularly with waste management, this is kind of how it goes. The town of Coventry is taking the waste from the entire state, and they've got a risk. And I don't know what the deal was for them, but that's what happens. And they get the trucks coming, and someone has to take this. And for better or worse, we have the infrastructure to do it, and to do it safely, and or as safely as it can be done. And we're trying to get it done more safely. So I respect whatever decision we make, but I think it's important to recommend that we don't think twice about sending our trash to Coventry and the folks up there that deal with that. And someone else takes, hazardous hazmat stuff, I don't know who's taking all the batteries and all that, I mean, someone's taking nuclear waste, right? So different places are taking different things in our country, and it's not evenly distributed. And it's just, that's kind of where I came down to make myself feel at peace with it anyway. So I'll just share that.
Yeah, Donna, go ahead.
Do I need that on there?
No.
You can hear me, okay. I don't want to come across as caring less. I mean, I don't need a granddaughter to then have me care about our environment. But I have consistently felt like it's why we recycle. We should be responsible for what we do. Why we're asking manufacturers to do circular economy. If they produce it, they should handle it and rehandle it until it never, ever disappears. And so I feel we are responsible, and a responsible thing to do is to do the best we can to improve the discharge and deal with these elements. I do not want to pass it down the road. So that's where I'm at. And I'm concerned about, I don't know what standard that is that you just created, because I didn't get the email. You probably, if you send it out, you probably send it to my city email, and I can't get to it from here. So that's another long story. So I would rather have a standard that I know, that's all. If you've created a 1 billion, I'm like, Connor, Vermont drinking level standard, I can relate to. So that's all I would want, a standard that's more defined. And our drinking standard probably aren't as good as they should be, not as I would have them, but at least they're there and they're known. So if you can tell me why you chose that in simple layperson terms, I won't oppose it. Otherwise, I prefer a standard that's more knowable. That's all.
So I think Lauren's language only dealt with the testing, and I believe that you said the 20 parts, but that was the Vermont drinking standard. I
That
believe
is why I
that.
heard his motion, I'm
No,
sorry.
he said the 20 parts per billion, but that is the Vermont drinking standard. I believe that's
I
what.
thought that the one that, so I was confused because I didn't have the email.
I just forwarded it to you, by the
Yeah,
way,
Lau-
to your other address.
Lauren was talking about 1 part per trillion, just so, because you can never get to 0. And I said, well, let's keep the deadline of 2023, but set the standard at the Vermont drinking water standard of 20 parts per trillion.
Okay.
That's my
That was my
rationale.
question. Just, I heard the other one. Thank you.
Fair enough. This, I agree that this, I feel like we could keep talking about this for a long time. We have to,
Motion.
yeah, I know, we've got emotion, and because part of me still wrestles with, in all honesty, like, if they're gonna go ahead anyway, then why, why would we bring it to Montpelier? What? But yeah, anyway, I genuinely feel conflicted about that. I do feel like it's important to be part of. I see this as part of the healing also, right? This is part of being responsible. Anyway, that's just what's going on inside my head anyway. Any other thoughts or conversations, any thoughts or comments about this? And if any other city staff want to weigh in on what we're about to vote on, that's welcome. I just want to give you the opportunity if you want to.
What I understand is the motion to stop taking leachate for about 1.5 years if we don't meet drinking water standards, Vermont drinking water standards. But just we heard from Casella that only the pilot system will be on at that time. So that would mean that we're either stopping taking leachate at that time, or we're only taking, the percentage, the 10% or so of what is treated. I just want to, make that clear for council that it's essentially saying we're not going to take leachate anymore. Because from the timelines Casella's laid out, they're not going to have full scale treatment within that time frame. 25 to have full scale. So one option would be that the pilot system, one alternative motion for council's consideration. And it's fine if you don't want to do that. I mean, that's okay. It's getting late, I understand that. Is to require that the effluent from the treated leachate from the pilot system meets, is at one or less parts per trillion by 2023, the 1.5 year time frame. And then we could use that standard, the treated system from the pilot, to require that on the next, as the next kind of requirement. Council will meet again, set a new motion that the full scale would have to meet what the pilot achieved. It's just another way to approach it that, but I understand this is a tough topic, and of course we'll support whatever council decides.
Done.
Well, and you brought up a point. I guess I've always felt that this is not necessarily the door shuts, but that we really stop and reassess. This is our goal, and we don't reach the goal. I didn't assume that would be an automatic door slamming, but that we'd be sitting down reassessing what we know, why we know it, why they didn't happen. Does that need to be written in here? Or does no one else feel that way?
Jeff.
I don't think it needs to be written because I think that we can always revisit the decision and decide to do something else based on information that's coming to us as we proceed. And so who knows if any of us will be on the council on July 2023, but in the months leading up to that, we will be continuing to get reports on how things are progressing, when they expect to get to the best possible standards, and we could at that point say, okay, you're doing exactly what we wanted you to do, and we're going to give you more time to get there. I can easily imagine that happening.
Well, and that's written in the letter, right? That we expect increased monitoring and testing, that we have quarterly reports from A&R, and thankfully Casella being part of those, and then an opportunity before next year's budgeting to revisit so that our DPW can, adjust as needed. So I don't think that that's outside. I mean, that's written in. So yeah.
So maybe that's a commitment to ourselves that we'd like to reevaluate this situation in a year.
Just looking at the letter, Jay's, of course, he's correct, he's one of the authors, but clearly states, council will revisit this policy and timeline to make any desired adjustments on or before November 2022. So next year at this time. So they're saying as of July 1, 2023, we won't take it, but we're gonna review this in November of 2022 to see if we want to adjust. So it's actually more clearly stated than I recall.
Or we could say, tomorrow we're not taking any more.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the point. I mean, maybe the pilot project, progresses further, but I just think it's important that we're saying that, hey, this is a time frame that we're holding to, and that it's not open-ended. You don't have more time. Be prepared, so yes, it could go either direction, but the point is, yes, we have the opportunity to revisit, but it's making sure that there's accountability throughout the whole process. I think even going 18 months to some of us maybe feels a little bit long, but knowing that there's accountability built into that time frame, I think is really important.
And the pilot pretreatment testing should be, even though it's not the full scale, it should be treating some portion of the leachate at Casella by July of 2023. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Some portion will be being treated.
We'll know results.
Right.
It'll be close.
Yeah.
So by the permit, we must be operational in the pilot 1 year from issuance of permit. So assuming the permit is issued, let's just call it January 1st, we must be operational by January 1st, 2023.
So in November 2022, when we're all sitting here in this room, just trying to make sure, you may or may not be operational. You'll be close.
Joe and I probably hope not to spend Christmas at the landfill, so we'd like to be.
I spend Christmas every year at the landfill.
Picking out, come on, dump picking.
Okay. Well, the idea that we would revisit it in a year is also comfort to me. Anyway, we'll know more. We'll be a little further in this process. All right. Any further discussion about this? Okay. And just checking to nobody else online who would like to say anything. All right. All in favor, please. Or there's been a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And opposed? Okay, so the motion passes. And so that we have something to give to A&R, comments on this permit.
And just so I'm crystal clear, so the language will change from any detectable PFAS to
PFAS chemicals above the Vermont drinking water standard.
Something like that.
I think actually leaving it at that, I mean, if by some chance they change the drinking water standard, hopefully to make it more protective in the next year and a half, could keep us at least up to date with them.
That's,
And then with that monitoring language,
Yeah.
that, I don't know, Donna, if you got that, but that just adds the upstream and downstream and that we want baseline testing.
yep, yep.
So,
So if
okay,
you-
I could,
If you can edit that, send it, then
I'll
we'll get it
edit,
submitted.
send.
Make sure you sign it.
Okay, great.
Beautiful. Thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, staff.
Yes, thank you, staff. Yeah, okay.
Smudge everybody when we leave.
Yeah, right.
Saying.
Okay, that is all of our business. Council reports, I'm gonna start with Donna. Shocking.
Okay, yes. Thanksgiving is coming next week. I hope you're all better prepared than I am. But I do have one request that's more on the serious note, and that is you all had Doug and Paco here when I was gone, talking about the Central Vermont Public Safety Authority. And in talking with the twin city teams, which is Barry and Montpelier's public safety staff and the city managers from both cities, they have reflected to me that they would like to take the Public Safety Authority's report and look at those recommendations and come out with the next step, especially how to fund the 3.9 million equipment that came out of those recommendations. And they would just like to work as they do as a staff committee. And I would like to know, and I think Bill would too, a nod if indeed the council supports the city staff putting that time in to try to advance a capital purchase on the public safety items. And then they would be working as a team and they can invite whoever they want in, including the consultant that we'll make available to them to try to advance those recommendations that came out of that study. If people have a nod, a thumbs up, that would be good to have the
No,
staff
actually,
do that.
I asked
Bill?
Donna to raise it. I think there'd been that agenda item to appoint us as a formal committee, and I think we just said, hey, if we're staff, we can work together, but before we put, if the council, either council doesn't want to pursue the Televate study anymore, tell us now before we spend a lot of time on this. I'm not guaranteeing, again, like anything else, you're not committing to it, but we're at least keep.
Sounds good.
We're in.
The thumbs up across the table there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, thank you. And now just to, some of you may have been familiar with the Karen Kitzmiller's coat drive, and my Montpelier Rotary Club took that over. And last year, due to the pandemic, we didn't collect used coats. We actually made a deal with Lenny's and bought retail coats. We did the same thing this year. And there's some like 800 coats that we're distributing. So I just want you to know that is in the works and people will have those coats. Again, supply chain is hard, but we did fundraising, and believe it or not, people who've done this for years bought our raffle tickets and had a big social party, still bought raffle tickets, still donated the money for the coats. It was really very heartwarming to know that people will come and support that effort. And there's kids, there's people on the street, but there's all sorts of families coming who just need winter coats. So it feels really good. And I hope you have a chance to support it in the future if you haven't already.
Your question, Cameron?
Yes, so I
So
can.
you gotta come up here then.
Yep.
So I can let the homelessness task force know and other folks who might need those coats. Have those already been distributed, or how do they get?
Sure. They can.
Who do they contact?
I'll find that for my road.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, I should know that.
I thought you were volunteering for a winter coat.
Is that it? Okay, Connor.
Yeah, right. I'm going to continue being a bit contrary tonight.
That's great.
So on Monday, the legislature will reconvene for a special session there to consider a compromise that the governor has put out, saying that, all right, the governor doesn't support a statewide mask ban, right? But he's willing to consider a deal where municipalities on an individual basis may be able to institute one. But they're gonna have to reconsider it every month, and they're not gonna be able to do it past April. Every month they have to reconsider it at a meeting if they want to keep it going. So I'm just like, I'm a bit upset that I don't like, municipalities being treated like political footballs in this case, Either it's the right move for a statewide mandate or it's not, but I think we've seen like studies show that the piecemeal approach doesn't work. And really what it is the executive branch shirking the responsibility and passing what should be a statewide responsibility onto municipalities, which isn't effective. And all it is a political soundbite. So I just want to tell everybody, I'll be.
You want us to sign your petition?
I mean, I guess I'm taking the temperature. Should there be a collective response on this before it goes to print on like Monday for the special session that we don't support this? Or, I mean, I'm happy to do something individually too, but I'm just letting you know. I just don't like it, it's not right. It's my report. Thanks.
Yeah. Fair enough. I'm losing brain cells, but if you need anything more formal from us, let us know.
I mean, I guess it's a question. Do other people feel similarly, or?
I agree 100%. I
Yeah.
would support a collective approach saying that, passing the buck down to municipalities, where there's no clear borders. I mean, it just is ridiculous. It's a waste of time.
I mean, we've done it in the past when, like, there was no other option. There was, the state of emergency had been just passed. And I guess I don't regret doing it at that point, but, we're a year into this. It seems silly.
So to be fair, if we do get that authority, I think we should take it seriously, like if or when that happens. Sure. But should there be a statewide approach?
Yes.
Yeah, that's where I am. I think that this is the one train that's going to get us to having the authority to create a mask regulation here in Montpelier. Because he's already said he's going to veto anything else, and I think he probably will. So if the question is, do we pass something encouraging our 2 representatives and our 3 senators to vote against the proposal, I clearly would not support that because we think we should have that authority. Should we consider maybe putting a charter amendment on the ballot to say we want the authority to create a public health order when it's whatever the language would be, then we might want to consider that. So it's not limited to just the present crisis.
No.
But that's not a question we need to deal with at 10 o'clock tonight.
Yeah.
And I'm not even saying like when it gets to the legislature, our delegation should vote against it. But I don't think like, playing games like this should not be called out in a public fashion. And if we support a statewide mask ban, we should tell the governor that in some formal manner.
Yep.
We should direct Bill to write a letter or the mayor.
Either way, we would do it on behalf of you all.
Then,
yeah,
sure. And you feel like you've got the sense of this conversation.
Got it. Dear Governor,
I'll just point out, and I personally agree with the sentiments, but I'll just point out that typically the municipal governments are seeking to have our own individual decision-making authority and resisting state mandates on us. So this is pretty much a 180 on that. However, I get it, and I think the distinction is for just like with things with the whole notion of state and federal regulations for things that don't recognize boundaries, and this is clearly something that doesn't. That said, we might take the authority to protect at least people within our boundaries and require it. Yes. Anyway, just pointing out that we're. Because I don't know where the legal cities and towns would come out on that.
Yeah, I put an asterisk for a worldwide pandemic.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm good.
Okay.
This is pure vodka.
Jennifer.
am complete, thank you.
Okay, Jack.
Just 2 points. One, we all heard this week that Senator Leahy announced that he's not running for reelection, and as a great senator, a great son of Montpelier who's done tremendous work, not just for the United States, but specifically for Montpelier. You go downtown, see what the funds he's brought to the city has done for us at the library and probably many other places. He'll have plenty of time for recognition, but I think he deserves that recognition. And just on a very much lighter note, through our debates tonight, I noticed the use of the word "y'all" from at least 3 members of the council, counting the mayor. So I think maybe the influence of the assistant city manager is making itself known.
She's doing it. It's the best gender neutral. I'm sorry, I have to say.
Yeah.
She is.
And I'm
Yeah, and I
born in the
didn't even
South.
hear you.
All right, Lauren.
Great. Well, you took my rant on the mask mandate off the table. Thank you. Check that off my list. Just wanted to acknowledge the good work of the activists that pushed the administration to actually extend the hotel program for our unhoused population. So I know that we still have lots of work to do, lots of issues and lots of things that our community can still do, but it was great to finally see that move through, thanks to some great activism and work from lawmakers pushing the administration, so yay. And lastly, our little lobbying committee is gonna meet next week, so if anyone has policy ideas of advocacy or policy positions that you think we all should be supporting as a city that could go on that legislative agenda, would welcome everyone's input.
I would just remind folks that tomorrow at 4 o'clock, we're gonna have a rededication of the Challenger Explosion Memorial, which is at Montpelier High School. It's sort of by the very small orchard that we have there. And so, yeah, I think that is it for me. And no, John's not here, so yeah.
Jack, I would just say that if it were up to you, we'd all be saying "use guys," right? I have a couple things. So she already mentioned the lobbying committee, so that's good. Just a reminder that actually the alternate side parking went into effect this past Monday, November 15th, and we will begin active enforcement next week on Monday the 22nd. So everyone's got a week to get used to doing that, but park on the odd side on odd nights and the even side on even nights. Fortunately, we haven't had really much plowing. And just more seriously, just to get you folks prepped for the next time we get together, we spent virtually all day in this room with the department heads working on the budget, half day yesterday on Zoom and some more time. And I think all of us collectively as a team, and perhaps all of you, had some hopeful illusion that everything was back to normal. And I think that we got a big reality dose this week. And I described it to the mayor as saying we have developed really good appetites, but our cupboard and refrigerator is still not full. And so we've had to make some, hard decisions. And so we're trying to clearly reflect the strategic plan and the priorities, and also the departmental needs and all of that. But I guess what I'm here to say is it will certainly not meet all needs, what's recommended, probably not even close. And I think we have to remember that we cut the budget last year over 4% because of COVID. And so we're trying to come back from that reduction, but our revenues, our parking and rooms, meals, and alcohol were the big ones, are just not. They're coming back. They're better, but they're not back to where they were. So even getting sort of back to where we were with all of the priorities that we've laid out, which were ambitious and plentiful, are going to be very difficult. So we're doing the best we can. We're trying to stay within the guidelines that you gave us with the surveys, and I think we'll do that. But just,
It's not as rosy as maybe we
it's
hoped.
not going to be that great thing where we just do all of that list and say, whew. We did figured out what it was cost, right, to do all of that list, and it was 12% or something like that, tax increase. So we figured that wasn't in the cards.
12%, yeah, that's.
I think we'll have to work really hard with our community because maybe we haven't shared enough of the pain with them. They really think everything's back. And
I think we all did.
Yep,
You know, I
obviously.
mean, but I mean, everyone, all of us here and all of us, and people were asking for the thing, and we were all like, "Yeah, this is going to be great." And it's still not all the way back, and I suspect probably local businesses feel the same way, and others. So yes, it's better. Yes, we're coming out of it. Yes, we'll probably be able to do better on our services, but our capital projects and some of our extras are going to still be tight unless you tell us otherwise, in which case we can go back to the drawing board. So
Yeah, okay.
on that cheery note.
Gee, thanks.
A little reality, okay. All right, thanks, everybody. So that is the end of our regular business. So without objection, we are going to adjourn 10:08. Fair enough. Deceptively short.